Broken leashes, unbroken hearts. Picture an abandoned warehouse on the edge of your hometown. Windowless, nameless, hiding its darkness behind a fence of rusted wire. Now imagine the night that fence is cut, and 34 trembling dogs stumble into moonlight for the first time, led by a shepherd who once knew nothing but commands and pain. This story begins there, but its roots stretch back to the moment Lana found Ash beneath a splintered bridge, rain bleeding through the cracks, hope flickering like a dying flashlight battery. He should have snapped, run, or at least growled her away. Instead, he placed his fate in the hands of a girl still learning how to breathe after loss. Together, they unravel a network of cruelty hiding in plain sight chains, shock collars, ghosts of barks that never reached human ears. Stay till the end, and you'll witness more than a rescue. You'll watch a sleepy town rise like a tide, turning an abandoned barn into a sanctuary where every thump of a tale sounds like a second chance. The house at the end of Sycamore Lane used to hum with life-warm lights glowing in every window, piano music fluttering from the den, the smell of cinnamon and pine wafting through the halls. But now, Hollow Creek's winter light barely reached its shutters, and inside, it had grown too quiet for a girl of 12. Lana Harper sat curled in the corner of the living room couch, her knees drawn up beneath her oversized sweater, gazing at a family photo that hadn't moved from the mantel since the funeral. Her parents smiled back from the glossy framer, Mom's hair wild from the wind, her dad's arms slung around them both after a hike. A photo taken 3 weeks before the accident. Before ice, Ridge Pass turned slick with freezing rain. Before the world fell silent. The house had once known laughter, footsteps running up and down the stairs, voices rising over board games and movie nights. Now, it felt like a museum, each room preserving a moment no one wanted to disturb. Even the piano in the corner, where her mother used to play lullabies, sat untouched. A faint layer of dust coated its keys, like time had settled into every crevice of the home. Grandma Ruth moved carefully through the kitchen, her footsteps muffled by old carpet and aching joints. She wasn't unkind, just distant. She had lost her daughter and son-in-law, and the grief lingered between them like a fog. Neither of them had found the words to reach across the silence. "Soup's on the stove," Ruth said, not looking up from the sink. "Okay," Lana answered, her voice barely louder than the whisper of the clock on the wall. They sat at opposite ends of the dining table, eating in silence. The only sound was the occasional clink of spoon against bowl. The air felt like it carried too much historivery plate and curtain, a relic from a different time, back when Ruth still laughed and Lana wasn't afraid of silence. Later that night, Lana lay in her room, staring at the ceiling, tracing the pattern of cracks like constellations she couldn't name. She turned her pillow to the cooler side, but the ache in her chest didn't ease. She hadn't cried in weeks, not because it didn't hurt, but because crying felt like letting go, and she wasn't ready for that. The house was a tomb of half-spoken memories, but outside beyond the porch, past the old oak trees, there was still air to breathe. There was still movement. And somewhere deep in her bones, Lana needed to move. The school bell rang at 3:12 p.m. Sharp, but for Lana Harper, it didn't mark the end of a school day. It marked her daily escape. Backpack slung loosely over one shoulder, she slipped through the back gate before anyone noticed. She had learned how to move like a shadow, weaving between parked bikes and broken fences with the kind of quiet that came from practice. Lana didn't take the main road home anymore. She didn't want the same questions, the same looks. Instead, she took the long way through the path behind Milner's orchard and past the rusted train tracks until she reached the edge of Hollow Creek Park. The park had been forgotten by most of Cedar Grove. What once boasted tidy benches and a painted gazebo had faded into an overgrown tangle of roots and whispers. New parents took their kids to the modern playground off Main Street. Teenagers avoided it, calling it creepy. But Lana? She loved it. This place was older than sorrow. The pine trees stood like sentinels, their trunks wide as barrels, their branches bent from age and storms. Moss clung to the bark in velvet patches. The wind didn't just rustle, hear it murmur, like the forest had secrets to tell if you just listened long enough. Lana walked slowly, letting her fingers graze the tops of tall grass. Her sneakers crunched along a barely visible path. The air smelled like wet bark and fading summer, even though fall was coming fast. Here, she didn't feel like the girl people whispered about in grocery store aisles. She was just part of something older, something quieter. She passed the old stone fountain long dry, cracked with ivy, and moved toward the wooden footbridge spanning Hollow Creek. The boards creaked under her weight, but she didn't mind. Below, the water was slow and dark, like it had forgotten how to hurry. She paused in the center of the bridge, looking down at her own reflection, distorted, faint, half there, just like she felt. The wind shifted. She turned toward a sound. It wasn't the breeze this time, it was sharper. A snap, a drag, like something heavy brushing through the underbrush. Lana froze. Her fingers instinctively tightened around the strap of her backpack. A squirrel? A deer? Then she noticed something she hadn't before. To the left of the bridge, near the collapsed remains of an old picnic shelter, the earth had been disturbed. The shelter's roof had caved in years ago, warped by storms and time, and the benches were now skeletal, half buried in moss, but carved into one of the support beam's deep, frantic gouges. Claw marks. She stepped closer, careful not to crunch the twigs underfoot. The claw marks weren't clean or even. They tore through the wood in ragged arcs. Desperate. Below them, in the soft earth, were paw prints. Large. Impossibly large. They circled like something had been pacing or trapped. Her breath hitched. A low sound rolled through the trees. Panting. Not wind. Not bird. Breathing. Her eyes scanned the woods, every muscle in her legs suddenly taut. The shadows between the trees deepened as clouds drifted across the late afternoon sun. Somewhere in the distance, a raven cawed, harsh and sudden. Then she saw them. 2 eyes, low to the ground, still, glowing not with malice but with something wilder, wary. The eyes stared from beneath a thicket of thorn and fern, just beyond the shattered beams of the old shelter. Amber, with a ring of something darker around the edge. Intelligent, alert, and scared. Lana's heart thudded so hard she could feel it in her throat. She didn't move, didn't blink. The forest around her fell into silence, even the wind holding its breath. The creature didn't lunge, didn't run, just watched. Seconds stretched. She couldn't see the rest of it, only a shadowed outline. But it was big. A dog? A wolf? No, something in between. Muscular, alert, but low to the ground like it was in pain or hiding. A slow exhale escaped her lips. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'm not here to hurt you." The eyes narrowed slightly, head tilting, listening. Another crack of branches and, in a blink, the shape was gone. The brush shivered, then stilled. The forest exhaled again, as if nothing had happened. Lana remained frozen for another full minute. Her palms were damp. Her chest ached from holding her breath. Then, slowly, she backed away. She looked down at the claw marks again. This wasn't just a wild animal. There was something in those eyes' recognition. Fear, pain, but not the kind that turned creatures feral. The kind that made them hide. That begged not to be seen, even as it longed for something different. She glanced toward the woods one last time. "I'll come back," she whispered. Then she turned and walked away, the wind rising behind her, whispering secrets through the pines, like voices trying to call her name. The clouds rolled in faster than Lana expected. One minute the sky above Hollow Creek was a milky gray. The next, it cracked open with a sigh, spilling cold rain in sudden sheets through the pine canopy. Lana gasped as drops slapped her shoulders, soaking through her sweatshirt in seconds. She turned instinctively toward the nearest shelter, the bridge. She ran, arms curled over her head, breath quick and uneven. By the time she reached the footbridge, her hair clung to her cheeks like seaweed, and her jeans felt like wet paper. The old beams creaked under her steps, and she ducked beneath the slats where the bridge's belly arched above the creek's edge. It was darker here. The underside was low and damp, smelling of mildew and old iron nails. Roots jutted out from the embankment, and a fine mist hovered just above the water's surface, like ash rising from a fire that never burned. The rain echoed above her, a steady rhythm against the boards. She caught her breath, wiping her sleeve across her face, when she heard it. A low, ragged breath. Not her own. Lana froze. She turned slowly, her eyes adjusting to the shadows, and then she saw him, Curled in the hollow space between two warped beams and a mound of dry leaves was the dog. Not just any dog. Him. The one from the underbrush. The glowing eyes. The shape in the thicket. He was larger than she had imagined, his body coiled tight, chest rising and falling with slow, measured effort. His fur was mottled with dirt, leaves, and blood. Dark patches soaked into his thick German shepherd coat. One of his front legs trembled slightly, tucked awkwardly beneath him, and a long scar ran along his side, half-healed but raw at the edges. But it was his eyes that stopped her heart. They weren't glowing now. They were real, wounded, a mix of gold and rust, ancient and aching like someone who had survived too much. He didn't growl, didn't bare his teeth. He just watched her, motionless but not indifferent. Lana knelt slowly, her breath catching in her throat. "It's you," she whispered, as if saying it too loud would send him into the woods forever. "You're hurt." The dog blinked but didn't move. Rainwater dripped from her bangs. She didn't care. She shrugged off her backpack and unzipped it with shaky fingers. From the front pouch, she pulled out the sandwich she hadn't eaten at lunch, peanut butter and honey, wrapped in wax paper. Her stomach had been too knotted all day to eat it. Now she tore it in half. The scent wafted through the damp air. The dog's ears twitched. She placed half the sandwich a few feet in front of her, then slid it gently closer across the slick wood. "I don't want to hurt you," she said softly. "You're safe now, I promise." The dog didn't move toward the food. But he didn't back away either. He just stared at her, then at the sandwich, then back again as if measuring the risk. Lana studied his face. Beneath the grime and old wounds, there was a nobility to him, something trained, disciplined, but broken, like a soldier lost in a country that no longer recognized his uniform. "You used to belong to someone," she whispered. "Didn't you?" He blinked again. "I'll come back tomorrow," she said, swallowing the lump in her throat. "With more food. And something for your leg." She didn't expect an answer, but she still waited a beat, as if he might nod. The rain had softened to a drizzle, though the mist under the bridge still curled like smoke around her feet. Her heart thudded with something she couldn't nomino fear, not yet trust, something in between. A kind of reverence, as if the forest had led her here for a reason. Lana stood slowly, backing away the way she'd come. The dog didn't chase, didn't run, just watched her leave. She paused at the bridge's edge, shivering, water dripping from her fingertips. "I'll be back," she said again. Then she turned and ran. The path was slippery, but her feet barely touched the ground. She didn't stop until she reached the orchard fence. Her lungs burned, her heart roared, but her chest felt full in a way it hadn't in months. There was something in that dog's eyes that mirrored her own. Grief, loneliness, and the tiniest spark of hope. Ruth Waverly stood at the kitchen window, drying her hands with the same faded towel she'd had for nearly 20 years. Outside, the sun was low, leaking gold through the thinning clouds, casting long shadows across the orchard. A faint breeze stirred the old wind chimes on the porch, letting out a hollow, wistful clang that reminded her of someone calling a name into an empty house. Behind her, the back door creaked open, then slammed shut. Footsteps, fast ones. Then a clatter the fridge door, the cupboard. Ruth turned. Lana was halfway through tugging off her sneakers, the laces still double-knotted and caked in dried mud. Her jeans were streaked with something darker, damp earth or wet bark. Ruth couldn't tell. The girl's sweatshirt was bunched around her waist, revealing a smear of something reddish-brown near the hem. "Peanut butter?" Ruth narrowed her eyes. "You're late," she said, keeping her voice gentle but firm. "And soaked." Lana didn't look up. "Got caught in the rain." "I'm fine." She was already halfway up the stairs when Ruth called after her. "Don't forget to leave those shoes by the mat." A pause. Then a soft thump as Lana kicked off the mud-caked sneakers too hard. One landed on its side. The other bounced against the umbrella stand. She disappeared around the upstairs corner before Ruth could say more. Ruth frowned. It wasn't just the mud. Lana had come home late 4 times this week. Twice, the sandwich she usually saved for an after-school snack had vanished, though she claimed she wasn't hungry. And she'd been quieter. Not sulky, just distracted. as if her mind were always somewhere else, listening for something she couldn't explain. Ruth picked up the shoes carefully, holding them by the laces. They were damp, cold, the soles packed with pine needles. She recognized the scent, the woods. It had been years since she let herself walk near the pine trail at the edge of Hollow Creek Park. She avoided it, even when she took the longer road to church or the farmer's market. She told herself it was too uneven for her ankles, too muddy in spring. But deep down, she knew the truth. It was the dogs. The memory still clawed its way into her dreams sometimes. Barking. Fast, furious barking. Out of nowhere. She'd been 8. A neighbor's shepherd had broken loose. She could still hear the growl behind her, the snap of jaws near her wrist before someone tackled it. No blood, no stitches. But the fear had settled in her bones like mold in the walls. She'd never told Lana. There'd been no need. Until now. Ruth walked to the hallway closet and pulled out the small food bin. It was where she kept sandwich bags and the box of granola bars she used for lunches. The peanut butter jar, she noticed, was lighter than yesterday. Her fingers grazed, the shelf fan froze. The first aid tin was open. One of the elastic wraps was missing. So were 3 antiseptic wipes and a square of gauze. Her breath caught in her chest. Lana was hiding something. Ruth closed the closet slowly, setting the bin down without a sound. Her eyes drifted toward the ceiling, to where Lana's bedroom sat tucked beneath the eaves like a secret. Part of her wanted to march up the stairs right then, demand answers. But another part, quieter, older, knew better. Not yet. If she pushed, Lana would shut down. She always had a soft shell, that girl. Grief had made it softer. And now, there was something else. Something flickering behind her eyes. Not just sadness. Purpose. A glimmer of fire she hadn't seen since the funeral. Ruth poured a cup of tea, her hand steady, even as her thoughts roiled like the steeping leaves. She would wait, but she would watch. That night, when Lana came down for dinner, her hair was brushed, her sweatshirt changed, and her cheeks pink from the shower. She smiled faintly, asked about Ruth's roses, and offered to set the table before Ruth could even ask. Almost too normal. But Ruth caught the way she rubbed her wrist, absent-mindedly, the same hand that had been clutching something in her hoodie pocket when she'd run in earlier. A whisper of dried blood stained the edge of her thumbnail. "Did you get scratched?" Ruth asked gently, gesturing to her hand. Lana froze for half a beat. "Just caught it on a branch. It's nothing." Ruth nodded, didn't press. She watched as Lana scooped mashed potatoes onto her plate, barely touching them afterward. Her eyes flicked toward the window every few minutes, as if something or someone might be waiting out there in the orchard. That night, after the dishes were done and Lana retreated to her room, Ruth stood alone at the window once more. The pine trees beyond the orchard loomed tall and dark in the moonlight, their branches whispering secrets only the wind could hear. Ruth folded her arms, her fingers twitching slightly against the memory in her skin. She didn't believe in coincidence, and she'd learned, too many times, that the quietest secrets often barked the loudest when no one was listening. The next afternoon, the sky over Cedar Grove was bruised with the color of steel wool and smoke, a soft wind stirring the pine needles into a constant whisper. Lana walked faster than usual, her hands clutched tightly around a flannel-wrapped bundle, leftover roast, folded gauze, and the smallest flashlight she could sneak from the kitchen drawer. Each step toward Hollow Creek Park sent the weight in her chest fluttering between hope and fear. She'd barely slept the night before. That dog, no, not just a dog. Something in his eyes had unraveled her. There was pain there, yes, but also silence. Not the fearful kind, but a watching kind, like he was waiting to decide if the world still deserved his trust. She crossed the rusted footbridge carefully, her boots making soft thuds on the warped wooden planks. The rain from the day before had left the trail slick and shadowed. The broken picnic shelter loomed ahead, its roof caved in on one side, tangled with ivy and thyme. She slowed. Then she saw him. He was there curled beneath the collapsed edge, still hidden in shadow. His body tensed when she approached, front paws stiff, one leg awkwardly stretched as if he couldn't bear weight on it. The damp had drawn a faint steam from his fur. His eyes, amber and endless, glowed faintly in the gloom. Lana knelt a few feet away. "It's me again," she whispered. "I told you I'd be back." Carefully, she unwrapped the roast and placed it on the flat stone near her. She didn't move closer, didn't reach, just sat. folding her knees to her chest, the gauze bundle in her lap. The dog didn't move. Not at first, but the scent reached him. Slowly, stiffly, he pulled himself forward, dragging his injured paw slightly. He paused once, eyes flicking to hers, then to the meat, then back. Lana held her breath. Then, he took it. He didn't gulp it down, didn't devour it like a stray. Instead, he ate in slow, careful bites, chewing, swallowing, licking his teeth. "I saved the best part," she said softly. "My grandma's roast. She won't even notice it's gone." The dog's ear twitched. For a moment, they just sat Lana, cross-legged and still damp from the trail. The dog, tense but no longer retreating. Rain dripped in the distance from the tree branches, a gentle, steady rhythm like the ticking of a forgotten clock. That's when she saw it. A glint, faint but unmistakable, hanging from the worn leather of his collar. She shifted slowly, leaning just enough to glimpse it. A split, rusted tag. The letters barely legible under years of grime and weathering. K9 to 7A. The rest was shattered. Her breath caught. "You're not just any dog, are you?" She reached into her flannel and pulled out the gauze, unfolded it, let him see it. "I want to help," she murmured, "but only if you let me." He didn't flinch. That was new. Very, very slowly, she crawled close reach movement smooth, non-threatening. He watched her, nose twitching, muscles tight, but he didn't growl, didn't pull away. When she got within arm's reach, she stopped, held out her palm. After several long seconds, he leaned forward and sniffed. His breath was hot, damp. The tip of his nose brushed her fingers like a memory. Lana's heart beat like a drum in her ears. Then, almost imperceptibly, he lowered his head, just enough for her to see the crusted gash behind his ear. The blood had dried, thick and blackened. There were older scars, one along his flank, another jagged one near his rib cage, as if a blade had once met flesh. "Someone hurt you bad," she whispered. "But you're still here. That has to mean something." She dabbed the wound gently. He flinched once, but didn't growl. She cleaned around it, wrapped the gauze carefully. "There," she breathed. "It's not much, but it's a start." A breeze stirred the pine branches above them, sending down a rain of golden needles. She sat back again, folding her arms around her knees, shivering slightly. "You know, I used to come here with my dad," she said quietly, her voice shaking not from cold, but from memory. "He said the trees whispered things if you listened hard enough." The dog didn't move. "My mom used to pack hot chocolate in a thermos. She said even the wind feels less lonely with something warm in your hands." The trees said nothing, but something about the silence felt changed, softer. Lana turned to the dog again. "I'm gonna call you Ash," she said. "You're not fire anymore. You're what's left when the world burns down and you're still standing." Ash blinked. Then, to her quiet astonishment, he laid his head on his paws, not facing away, but toward her. Something cracked inside her, something that had stayed frozen since the accident, since the police station, since the 2 caskets and the sound of grown-ups trying to find the right words and failing. Tears prickled the corners of her eyes, but she didn't wipe them away. "You don't have to be afraid," she whispered. "Not of me." She stood slowly, wiping her hands on her jeans. Ash lifted his head again, watching. "I'll be back tomorrow," she promised, stepping back into the mist. Behind her, the whispering pines shifted, as if murmuring something only Ash could understand. By the 4th day, the pines no longer whispered like strangers. They greeted her like sentinels, standing watch over something sacred. Lana moved through the underbrush with practiced ease now, every step purposeful, quiet. In her backpack, half a grilled cheese, 2 hard-boiled eggs, a water bottle she'd poured from home, and a rolled-up paperback copy of Where the Red Fern Grows. She had borrowed it from the school library without telling anyone. It felt right somehow, like the kind of story Ash would understand. Ash. The name had taken root. She reached the shelter just past the moss-streaked footbridge. The collapsed roof was still there, leaning like a broken shoulder, but the shadows beneath had changed. Because he was there, waiting. He didn't rise as she approached, not out of weakness, but comfort. His paw, still wrapped in her makeshift gauze, stretched out in front of him. He gave a low chuff when he saw her neither growl nor bark, more like a tired exhale that sounded an awful lot like, "Finally." "Hey, Ash," she whispered, dropping to her knees. The moment she unzipped her bag, his ears perked. Lana smiled and offered him the grilled cheese in 2 pieces, watching as he took them gently from her palm, teeth grazing her skin like a secret handshake. "You always eat the crust first," she murmured. Weird. The routine had become a rhythm. Food first, water second, then came the bandage. She moved carefully, kneeling beside him, unwinding yesterday's work. The paw was healing slowly, unevenly, but healing nonetheless. No more crusted blood, no more gaping split. She cleaned it with a damp cloth, then pressed a new pad and wrapped it snug. Ash watched her the whole time, blinking slowly. "You've got soldier eyes," she whispered. "Not the kind that look for threats, the kind that already know where they are." Once done, she wiped her hands, pulled the book from her backpack, and settled beside him against the shelter wall. "Okay," she said, flipping it open to the dog-eared page. Chapter 5. "Billy's pups are growing fast, just like you, huh?" Ash shifted beside her, resting his muzzle across his front paws. His tail still matted, still not fully wagging, gave one short thump against the damp ground. Lana smiled. It wasn't just about food anymore. He stayed for her voice. She read slowly, with feeling, sometimes whispering certain lines, sometimes stopping to glance at him. He didn't understand the words, but something in her tone, in her breathing, reached him. And that mattered more than syllables ever could. The story spilled from her lips like something sacred, about a boy who saved 2 dogs, and the way those dogs saved him back, about forests, pain, love, loss. The kind of story only someone broken could truly understand. Ash blinked. His ears twitched. His breathing softened. "You're not scary," Lana said quietly, closing the book. "You're just hurt." He didn't move, but he didn't look away either. "I know what that feels like," she continued, her voice wavering. "Everyone thinks I'm strong because I don't cry. But sometimes I think if I start, I'll never stop." She reached out slowly, laying her hand gently on his shoulder. He tensed, but just for a heartbeat. Then he exhaled and leaned into her palm. The warmth that met her fingers was real, heavy, alive. In that moment, something cracked, like an old window letting in spring air after years of being painted shut. Not loud, but permanent. She leaned forward, resting her forehead lightly against his. "You're not alone anymore," she whispered, "and neither am I." They stayed like that for several minutes, girl and dog, broken and building. Strangers slowly stitching themselves back into something like belonging. When the light began to fade, Lana packed her things. She left half the egg behind, knowing he'd eat it later, knowing he trusted her enough now not to run when she was gone. Before she stood, she glanced back. Ash was watching her. And then just once his tail moved. Not wildly, not wagging, but it swept the pine needles once, softly. She smiled so hard it hurt her cheeks. "Same time tomorrow," she said. "I'll bring peanut butter." And then she was gone, her boots crunching gently down the trail as twilight crept in. Behind her, Ash laid his head down, not in fear, but in rest. The wind had changed that evening. Ruth felt it as she stood on the front porch, watching the sky fade into shades of bruised purple and slate. The kind of stillness that came before something shifted, whether weather or truth, she couldn't say. But Lana hadn't come home yet. Again, and her muddy shoes, her vanishing leftovers, her distracted silence over dinner, it all stacked in Ruth's chest, like slow-growing pressure behind her ribs. A grandmother's intuition was not a sharp thing. It was soft, heavy, patient like water, seeping through cracks until something finally gave. Tonight, she decided, the wondering had to end. She pulled on her old cardigan, left the porch light off, and stepped into the dark. The woods behind Cedar Grove hadn't changed much in 50 years. The pines still reached like solemn sentinels. The trails, though overgrown, still remembered where feet used to tread. Ruth moved with quiet, measured steps, her breath held tight like it used to be during childhood games of hide and seek. Only now, she wasn't chasing laughter. She was chasing her granddaughter. It didn't take long. Lana left breadcrumbs unintentionally, but clearly. A snapped twig here, a worn shoe print in the mud there. Ruth followed the signs, her heart beating a little faster with each step, not from exertion, but from not knowing what, exactly, she was walking toward. Then she heard it. A voice. Soft. Familiar. Lana's. Ruth stopped behind a thick trunk of pine, steadying herself as she peered through the branches. Her knees ached, her breath shallow, but the sight before her made her forget the pain. Lana knelt in a clearing of pine needles and broken beams where an old shelter had once stood. She wasn't alone. Beside her, half curled under the remains of the structure, was a dog. But not just a dog. Massive. Scarred. One paw thickly wrapped in bandages that were clearly not store-bought. Its fur was patchy in places, dark as the forest floor. A faint tremble ran through its flank with each breath. But those eyes were open and fixed on Lana, calm as dusk, deep, amber, and old. Lana sat beside him like it was the most normal thing in the world. She reached into her backpack, pulled out a jar of peanut butter maybe, and scooped a small spoonful, offering it with a smile. The dog, slow and careful, licked it from her hand. And then Ruth's breath caught Lana leaned forward, and without fear, without flinch, gently cradled the animal's great head in her lap. She was stroking his ears, whispering something Ruth couldn't hear. The dog exhaled and closed his eyes. Ruth's entire body locked, every muscle, every instinct. She didn't move, didn't breathe. Memories she'd spent decades burying clawed their way to the surface. The bite, the screaming, the blood. She'd been 7, maybe 8, a shepherd too, unprovoked, they'd said. But all she remembered was the pain and the terror that followed years of jumping at barks, frozen in fear at the sight of leashes or wagging tails. And now, here was her granddaughter, her only living family, pressing her forehead against the beast like he was some kind of wounded angel. She wanted to shout, to drag Lana away, to end this madness before something snapped. But she couldn't, because something in that clearing held her frozen not with fear, but awe. The way the girl and the dog existed in a silence deeper than sound. The way their breaths matched. The way that tail, barely moving, swished gently across the pine needles like it had forgotten how to be afraid. It wasn't a wild dog. It wasn't a threat. It was something else entirely. Something broken. Something healing. Ruth leaned against the tree, her fingers trembling against the bark. For the first time since the accident, she saw Lana as more than a fragile survivor. She saw strength, and gentleness, and quiet rebellion. The girl had built something no adult could give her a sanctuary, not of walls, but of trust. It shook Ruth to her core. She turned slowly, knees weak, and retraced her steps through the underbrush, each footfall softer than the last. She didn't stop until she reached the porch again. Her hands shook as she held the railing, steadying herself. Inside, the house waited in its familiar stillness. Faded photos, worn rugs, the teapot she never used anymore. Everything unchanged. Except her. That night, she didn't confront Lana. She didn't demand answers or raise her voice. Instead, she sat by the window, a single lamp glowing behind her, and watched the path through the trees until Lana reappeared, muddy shoes, tangled hair, backpack clutched to her chest like a secret she wasn't ready to share. Ruth said nothing, but her eyes followed the girl up the stairs with something that hadn't lived there in a long time. Understanding. And something else. A quiet, trembling hope. The clouds had been creeping in all afternoon slow, heavy things like gray bruises dragged across the sky. By the time Lana stepped onto the porch, the air was thick enough to drink. The wind hissed between the eaves, and pine needles danced like warnings. A storm's coming, Ruth muttered from the kitchen window, her hand tightening around a chipped teacup. Smells like trouble. Lana didn't answer. Her backpack was already slung over one shoulder, the sandwich she'd stolen from dinner wrapped tightly in a napkin. She was halfway down the steps when Ruth's voice cut through the wind. "Don't you run off in this weather." But Lana kept walking boots splashing through puddles. Hair whipped across her face. Her legs knew the way now. Past the mailbox, leaning like a tired soldier under the broken fence, across the mossy stones that lined the forgotten path to the old bridge. She didn't need to think. Her heart was already there. Ash wasn't under the bridge. She spun, panic clawing at her throat. Then movement. He was crouched just beyond the tree line, half shadow, half beast, his fur slick with rain. His leg was worse. The bandages she'd wrapped 2 days ago had unraveled and hung like limp ribbons from his paw. But it wasn't the wound that struck. It was his eyes. Wide, alert, afraid. Thunder cracked overhead like bones breaking in the sky. "Ash," she whispered, kneeling. "Please, come with me. It's not safe here." He didn't move, but he didn't run either. Another crack of thunder. She winced, then took a step closer. "I have a garage. It's dry and warm. You don't have to stay. Just tonight. Just until the storm's over." The rain came down in sheets, drumming against her shoulders. Lana reached out a trembling hand. Ash's nose twitched. For a moment, everything stilled the storm. The fear, the years of whatever haunted him. Then he limped forward. They arrived at the back door soaked to the bone, Lana shivering, Ash dripping and silent beside her. The garage loomed dark and unfamiliar. Ruth stood in the doorway, arms folded tight against her chest, her eyes locked on the dog like he was a ghost come to collect a debt. "I told you," Lana pleaded. "He's not dangerous. He's massive. He's hurt." Lightning illuminated the hollows under Ruth's eyes. She looked at Ashley, looked in for a second. Something faltered in her expression. A flicker of memory. A tremor. "One night," Ruth said finally. "That's all." Lana nodded, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. "Thank you." Ruth didn't answer. She turned and disappeared into the house, the screen door creaking shut behind her like a sigh. Lana led Ash into the garage. It smelled of old paint, rust, and forgotten summers. She pulled a folded blanket from the shelf and laid it down in the corner. He circled once, twice, then lowered himself with a quiet grunt. "You're safe," she whispered. "No one's gonna hurt you here." "Oh." She sat beside him, back against the wall, the silence between them growing warm. She could hear his breathing slow, steady, a rhythm that matched the patter of rain on the roof. Her fingers brushed the edge of his collar again. That broken K9 tag still dangled there, etched with the half-letter R and something else too worn to read. "Who were you before all this?" she asked softly. "Did someone love you?" Ash blinked, his tail thumping once against the floor. Lana leaned closer, pressing her palm gently to his side. "You can stay as long as you want. Even if she says one night, I'll find a way." Ash didn't answer, but he didn't look away either. Inside the house, Ruth lay awake in bed. The wind rattled the windows, and the rain wept down the glass. She should be asleep. She wanted to be asleep, but the silence gnawed at her. Not a silence of peace, but one heavy, with breath and presence. Something was different. She rose and stepped barefoot down the hallway, each creak of the wood a memory unburied. Through the thin wall, she could hear them, Lana's voices soft, storytelling. And beneath it, a sound Ruth hadn't expected. A low, rhythmic breath, pacing, then stillness, then a faint thump of a tail against cement. She pressed her ear to the door. "And my dad used to carry me on his shoulders," Lana was saying. "He said I could see the whole world from up there. It felt like flying." A pause. Then, "Do you think you ever flew, Ash?" Silence. Then the softest sound, a small huff, almost like a laugh in dog's breath. Ruth's throat tightened. Her hand hovered above the doorknob. She didn't turn it, didn't open it, just stood there, remembering a different dog, a different garage, a scream, a bite, blood in the gravel, and her mother's voice yelling, "Never trust them, not after that." But this wasn't that dog, and Lana wasn't her. She lowered her hand and walked away. Lana didn't know Ruth had listened. She didn't know the storm would last through dawn, or that Ash would fall asleep with his head against her knee. All she knew was that something had shifted inside her, inside him, inside the walls of a home that had long forgotten how to bend. She watched the rise and fall of his chest, his scars, his silence. "You're not scary," she whispered. "You're just hurt." And in the dark, Ash thumped his tail once more. The morning after the storm broke in bruised streaks across the sky. The world woke up slow and dripping. Rain clung to the gutters like old tears, sliding down shingles and collecting in the flower pots Ruth had stopped tending years ago. The garage was quiet, almost too quiet, as if holding its breath. Ruth stood in the kitchen, cradling a steaming cup of tea with trembling fingers. Through the foggy window above the sink, she could just make out the slant of the garage roof, gray and soaked. She had barely slept. Every creak, every shuffle of paw on concrete had echoed through her bones. And that whisper, that gentle whisper from Lana in the garage. The way the girl's voice had softened, as if soothing a fevered ghost. Ruth didn't know what she'd expected. Blood? Barking? A feral howl? But the only thing she heard was calm. She placed the cup on the counter and stared at the back door for a long while. A part of her, perhaps the same part that used to wait up for her son when he was Lana's age, whispered that she was being foolish, that it was just a dog. But fear is a peculiar thing. It doesn't need logic to make its home. And hers had pitched its tent years ago, in the shadow of a childhood scar she rarely revisited. With a sigh, Ruth filled a metal bowl with cool water from the tap. The sound of it splashing brought back a flood of images she hadn't asked for. A distant firehouse, the smell of smoke, the pounding of boots, and the heavy thud of a dog black and gold dragging her husband out of rubble. That shepherd's eyes, steady and calm, watching her husband breathe again after the collapse. She hadn't thought about that dog in years. Ruth stepped into the garage quietly. The scent hit her first, not foul, but earthy, soaked fur and damp concrete, and something faintly coppery, like old wounds. The light filtered in through the high windows, casting soft pools on the floor. Ash lay curled in one corner on an old sleeping bag, still damp from the night before. Lana was beside him, curled like a comma, head resting on his flank. The dog lifted his head when Ruth entered, eyes alert but not alarmed. Not this time. His ears twitched, but he didn't rise. Ruth's heart caught. She moved slowly, careful not to disturb the moment. The bowl in her hand trembled as she set it down near him. Water sloshed against the rim, breaking the quiet. Ash blinked but didn't recoil. Lana stirred and sat up, rubbing her eyes. "He didn't sleep much," Lana whispered. "He was listening. All night." Ruth nodded, unsure what to say. Her fingers found the hem of her sweater and clutched it. Ash sniffed the water, then drank. His tongue moved slowly, delicately. A dog once trained not to waste motion, perhaps. Ruth took a step closer. He paused, his eyes on hers. And then it happened. A flicker. His tail gave a single, tentative wag. Ruth froze. A part of her broke open. The sound that escaped her lips wasn't quite a laugh, nor a sob, but something in between. Lana looked up at her, eyes wide. "I think he likes you now," Lana whispered. Ash's ears tilted forward slightly, and without thinking, Ruth crouched. Her knees ached, but she didn't care. She extended a hand, slowly, letting him see every inch of her movement. Her palm hovered near his head, breath held. Ash leaned forward and let her touch him. His fur was coarse and damp, knotted in places. Beneath it, Ruth could feel the faint tremble of muscle. He didn't flinch. His eyes closed for just a moment, and that was all it took. Something in Ruth cracked, then softened. "I haven't done that since," she began, voice trailing off like mist. Lana rested her head against Ash again. "What was his name?" Ruth blinked. "Hank. Your husband? Number the dog." Lana looked up. He was a firehouse dog. Saved Bill during a warehouse collapse in '78. Dug through smoldering timber with his paws until he found him. Ruth's voice shook. "Bill never forgot. Neither did I." Ash nudged Ruth's hand gently with his snout. She smiled. It was a smile that hadn't touched her in years, not since Bill's funeral, maybe. A smile that came from memory, not from force. "You remind me of him. Same eyes. Like you know something the rest of us forgot." Ash licked her fingers, Onsa salt and storm and something like thanks. Lana beamed, cheeks flushed. "I knew you'd like him. He's not scary, just hurt." Ruth nodded, and something shifted between them. Not just the girl and her grandmother, but the circle they formed, now complete with this wounded sentinel at their center. The garage door creaked in the wind outside. The world felt distant, quieter. Ruth stood slowly, joints protesting. "He stays in the garage, just for now." Lana nodded quickly. I'll help clean it, and we can get blankets. Ruth glanced down at Ash. He was watching her not as a threat, not with fear, but with something gentler, something worn in, familiar. She turned to leave, pausing at the doorway. Thank you for trusting her, she said almost to herself. Ash didn't reply, but his tail tapped the concrete twice, and for Ruth, that was enough. Ash started pacing before the sun came up, not in fear but with a sentinel's steadiness. Each soft footfall across the garage floor was deliberate, almost rehearsed. Lana, wrapped in a quilt by the door, stirred awake to the muted rhythm of claws against concrete. She rubbed her eyes and watched him through the shadows. Upright, alert, shoulders stiff beneath his battered coat. A low growl hummed in his throat as wind nudged a loose shutter on the side of the house. Shh, it's okay, Lana whispered. It's just wind. But Ash didn't stop. He moved between the garage door and the wall, then back again, pausing to glance toward where Lana sat, like a protector walking his perimeter. When Ruth stepped out into the morning with her worn slippers and a tray of toast and water, she noticed it too the way Ash positioned himself, not just near Lana, but between Lana and every perceived threat. Whether it was a creaking pipe or the neighbor's cat darting across the driveway, Ash tracked it, guarded against it. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was loyalty. It was instinct. And it worried Ruth in ways she couldn't name. Later that day, while Lana was at school and Ash lay curled at the edge of the garage, Ruth sat at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee and an old laptop she barely knew how to use. The screen glowed dimly as she typed slowly. Dogs that protect too much. She expected parenting blogs or pet behavior tips. Instead, article after article about trauma in retired military and police dogs filled the screen. Words jumped out at her. Hypervigilance, scarring, handler loss grief. One photograph in particular made her breath hitch. A German shepherd in silhouette, eyes fixed on a soldier's coffin draped in the flag. The caption read, "He stood there for 6 hours before letting anyone else approach." Ruth's hand trembled as she scrolled. Not out of fear, but recognition. Ash hadn't just survived something. He'd been torn from it. That afternoon, when Lana came home with smudged elbows and a notebook covered in doodles of paws and stars, Ruth sat her down gently. "I want us to take him to the vet," Ruth said, watching her granddaughter's expression tighten. "Why?" Lana clutched the notebook to her chest. "He's okay now. He trusts us." "I believe you, sweet pea. But trust isn't healing. And I think he might need help in ways we can't give just yet." Lana didn't answer right away. She looked toward the garage door, where Ash's shadow could be seen through the crack near the bottom. Then she nodded. "Only if I go with him," she whispered. "You will." Dr. Hallis was a tall woman with calm hands and tired eyes that had seen more than she ever talked about. The clinic was small more of a home than a hospital, but it smelled clean and quiet, like lavender and antiseptic. Ash didn't growl when they arrived, but he didn't wag either. He stood rigid beside Lana, gaze flicking to every noise, nostrils flaring at the scent of other animals. His tail didn't curl or drop, it hovered, undecided. Dr. Hallis crouched several feet away, letting her stethoscope dangle like a leash. "May I?" she asked, voice soft. Lana knelt and pressed her forehead against Ash's shoulder. "It's okay. She's good." Ash didn't move. Then, with a slow breath, he took a step forward. The examination room was quiet except for the hum of a small ceiling fan and Lana's shoes tapping nervously against the metal table. "He's unique," Dr. Hallis murmured, running her fingers gently down Ash's side. "See this?" She pointed toward a patch of thickened, raised skin near his flank. "That's a scar from a long-term harness, probably worn daily, for hours. Military grade." She moved to his hind leg, lifting it carefully. "And hairish rapnel scarring. Not fresh, but deep. He's walked through things most dog sand people don't come back from." Ruth swallowed hard. "So he really was one of them?" Dr. Hallis nodded. "I'd bet my license on it. Retired or abandoned. The tag on his collar." She examined the rusted metal shard, still half attached to the worn leather. "K9, TX-43. That's a police unit designation. He was somebody's partner." Lana's eyes widened, her voice a whisper. Then why would they leave him? The vet paused. Sometimes it's not the dog that breaks. Sometimes it's the system. Back home, Ash curled up near the doorway like he always did. Lana lay beside him, tracing shapes into the concrete with a stick hearts, stars, and one word in shaky letters. Ash, I wish I knew who you were before, she said softly. I wish they'd never hurt you. Ash blinked slowly, then nudged his nose against her hand. From the kitchen window, Ruth watched. The bond between them wasn't just affection anymore. It was history. Meeting, healing. It was the unspoken understanding of two beings who'd both been hurt by the world and chose, somehow, to keep showing up anyway. She turned away and opened the pantry, pulling out a fresh box of gauze and a can of tuna. We'll take care of you, soldier, she murmured. You're not just a stray anymore. It was a Friday afternoon when the light changed. The kind of golden slant that made kids linger on the swings a little longer, made the rusted slide glow like something holy, and coaxed quiet from the trees. Lana and Emily were sitting on the bleachers beside the sandbox, nursing popsicles from the corner store, legs swinging idly. Ash lay a few yards away, just beyond the park fence. He never liked being too far from Lana. Though they told people he was a stray they were watching for a friend, most didn't ask. Ash's calm, steady presence spoke for itself until he wasn't calm. It was Emily who noticed the man first. He didn't fit. Among the joggers, moms with strollers, and retirees walking laps, he looked like he belonged in another season leather coat too thick for the mild weather, boots that thudded with purpose, and a cap pulled low, shadowing most of his face. He moved slow, deliberate, not aimless, but like someone checking boxes on a list. Emily paused mid-sentence. That guy gives me the creeps, she whispered. Lana turned. The man was kneeling now, speaking to two younger boys on the edge of the jungle gym. He held something in his hand. A photo? Do you think he's lost? Lana asked. Maybe, Emily said. But her voice was thinner now. They watched as one of the boys shook his head, and the man tucked the photo back into his pocket. He stood and turned just slightly, and Lana caught a flash of something in his eyes. Not panic, not anger. Calculation. Ash, even from behind the fence, rose. His ears stiffened. That low rumble began in his chest, a growl that lived somewhere between memory and warning. Lana stood, but before she could move, Emily's friend Rowan ran up, breathless and pale. He showed me a photo, she said quickly, of a dog, a German shepherd. Looked like Ash. He asked if I'd seen it around town, said he lost him. But what? Lana's voice was tight. Rowan glanced around, lowered her voice. Something felt wrong. He didn't say the dog's name, just said it was valuable. And when I asked how long he'd been looking, he changed the subject. He kept glancing at my phone like he was waiting for me to take a picture. Lana felt her stomach knot. Are you sure it looked like Ash? Rowan nodded. Not a perfect match, but close. Same scar above the eye, same build. The man was walking again now, farther away. He moved along the path toward the north exit, blending easily into the stretch of cars and late commuters. Ash barked sharply once. Just one sound, but it echoed like a warning bell across Lana's ribs. That night, back at the house, Lana paced. Ruth had gone to her church committee meeting, and Ash sat pressed against the kitchen door like a statue carved from old war stories. His eyes didn't leave her. She pulled out her sketchbook, turned to a blank page, and tried to recreate what she remembered from the stranger's face. But all she could manage were Shadow's sloped brow, the tight angle of a jaw, that cap hiding something. Who are you? She whispered, not to Ash, but somehow to both of them. Ash got up, padded to her side. He rested his heavy head on her knee. She ran her hand over the fur behind his ears. It was warm and strangely calming. You know him, don't you? Ash's eyes met hers. Deep wells, tired, alert, haunted. The next day, Ruth noticed Lana double-checking the locks on every door before school. She asked gently if everything was okay. Lana hesitated, then nodded. But that was a lie, and Ruth knew it. At school, Lana pulled Emily and Rowan aside. Don't talk about Ash at all, not even as a joke. If anyone asks about dogs, say you haven't seen anything. Emily nodded, already nervous. Do you think he's dangerous? I don't know, Lana said, voice barely a whisper. But I think Ash ran from something. Or someone. At recess, Lana sat under the same tree they always chose, but her gaze never stopped scanning the fence line. It wasn't just fear that settled in her chest, no, it was responsibility. Ash had trusted her. Ash had chosen her. She wouldn't let that be for nothing. That evening, Ruth was waiting at the door when Lana got home. She didn't say a word at first, just handed her a folded newspaper. Lana's eyes dropped to the front page. Search continues for missing K9 from private security firm. Below the headline, a grainy image of a German shepherd, a younger version of Ash. Same eyes, same scar. The article mentioned a break-in at a training compound 6 months ago. The dog had vanished. Highly trained, considered dangerous in the wrong hands. Ruth watched her granddaughter's face shift shock, recognition, fear. He's not dangerous, Lana said immediately. She's broken, but he's good. Ruth nodded. I know. Lana looked up. You do? I saw the way he looked at you when you were sick, and how he checks the windows before he eats. That's not a threat. That's trauma. A silence stretched between them, long and fragile. Then Ruth added gently, but if someone's looking for him, we need to be careful. We don't know what they want him for. Lana tightened her grip on the paper. Then we don't let them find him. Ash, from his place near the back door, let out a small huff, like he agreed. The sky had dulled to a pale bruise by the time Lana kicked her muddy sneakers off at the door. Her socks squished with remnants of wet grass, but she hardly noticed. Her mind replayed the image of the man-he's slick leather coat, the way his eyes had scanned the playground like he was reading shadows. Ash was waiting at the threshold to the living room, his posture alert, ears perked not, the soft, gentle posture he usually reserved for her now, but something taut, on edge. He didn't say much, Lana murmured, crouching down and reaching out to stroke his head. Just asked if anyone had seen a German shepherd. Emily said he had a photo. She hesitated, fingers stiffening. Said the man gave her the chills. Said you looked like the dog? Ash jerked. Not visibly, not dramatically, but Lana felt it under her fingertips. A shudder, deep and involuntary. Then a growl bubbled from his chestnut, the kind he used to make when she first approached him weeks ago. This one was heavier, lower, a sound that didn't want to scare her, but couldn't help rising from some haunted place inside. His body stiffened. The fur along his spine rippled upright. He turned his head, slowly, eyes narrowing not at her, but at the open window as if scenting something old, something familiar and dangerous, lingering just out of sight. Hey, she whispered, brushing her hand under his jaw, grounding him. It's okay. You're safe here. No one's gonna hurt you. But he wasn't listening. His eyes glazed, distant. He started pacing, nails tapping the hardwood in tense, clipped beats. Every few steps, he'd pause and glance toward the front door, then the window, then the hallway, as if mapping exits, as if remembering. Ruth came in from the kitchen, drying her hands with the towel. Lana, what's going on in here? He sounds... She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes locking on Ash's posture. The air shifted, like static before a storm. He's acting weird, Lana said, standing. It was the man I told you about. Emily said he had a photo. It looked like Ash. Ruth's brow furrowed. A man with a photo? Lana nodded. Leather coat. Clean shoes. He wasn't from around here. Ruth sat slowly on the edge of the sofa, towel clutched in her lap. She didn't speak for a moment, just watched Ash, who now stood near the door, growling low and steady, his gaze fixed like a sentry, awaiting the return of a ghost. That's not a normal growl, Ruth finally murmured. Ash turned his head sharply at the sound of her voice, but didn't growl at her. He blinked, once, then paced again, this time tighter, more anxious, tail stiff and head low. What if he's looking for Ash? Lana whispered, her voice nearly breaking. What if Ash ran away from him? Ruth's mouth flattened into a line. Or escaped, she said softly. She looked down at her hands. Those scars Dr. Hallis mentioned. The ones from tactical harnesses. The way he flinches at loud boots. The pacing at night. And the tag? Lana added, digging into her hoodie pocket and pulling out the split K9 tag she'd found hanging from Ash's faded collar. It was snapped in half. Ash suddenly stopped, walked slowly toward Lana, and sat. It was not a command he had learned from her. It was not trained obedience. It was trust. Heavy, painful, deliberate trust. Lana crouched in front of him, gently running her fingers through the fur behind his ears. "You don't want to go back, do you?" she said, almost inaudibly. Ash gave a sound barely audible, like an exhale mixed with a whimper. His eyes blinked slow and his forehead pressed softly to her shoulder. Ruth swallowed, watching them. Her heart ached with something she hadn't named in years. "I think he's been hunted before," Ruth said quietly. "And not just trained. Conditioned. Whoever had him before, they weren't his family. They were his handlers. There's a difference." Lana nodded, eyes wet. "He's not just scared. He's remembering." Outside, wind combed through the pines, shaking loose the memory of some long-gone whistle or order barked across a field. Ash flinched. Ruth stood. "From now on, no more walks through town. We keep him close. We watch for strangers." "But what if that man comes here?" Lana asked. Ash, as if understanding, stood again, his body positioned now not with fear, but with purpose. He placed himself between Lana and the door, still stiff, still scared, but ready. "He'll protect you," Ruth said, voice thick, "even if he's afraid." The silence between the three of them hummed like a fragile string pulled tight across time. Ash turned his head slightly, eyes glancing toward Ruth. She stepped forward. Kneeling slowly, deliberately, she extended her hand not as a command, not as an owner, but as someone saying, "I see you." Ash sniffed, leaned in. His nose touched her palm. Then his head followed. For just a moment, Ruth's hand cradled behind his ear like muscle memory, like she had once done for another soul long ago who wore a fireman's badge and came home shaking from screams no one else heard. "You can stay, Ash," she said, her voice shaking. "You don't ever have to go back." Ash closed his eyes. And for the first time since that day, under the overpass, his body stilled not in fear, but in fragile peace. It began with a knock 3 slow raps on the front door that sounded too calculated to be casual. Ruth was in the kitchen drying her hands when the sound came, and for a moment she simply stood there, frozen. Something about it didn't feel like a neighbor dropping by for sugar or a delivery truck backing up. Ash was already up, alert. He had been lying near Lana's feet, dozing in the warmth of the sun-soaked rug. Now, his posture shifted, ears stiff, body low, tail flat. A low growl rumbled in his chest like the rolling of distant thunder. Lana looked up from her sketch pad. "Who is it, Grandma?" Ruth moved to the hallway, wiping her hands on her apron. "Stay back," she said quietly. Her fingers reached for the chain lock out of instinct. She opened the door just a crack, the chain still latched. On the other side stood a tall man in a dark leather coat. His eyes gray like storm, cloud swept across the space behind her, scanning. His hair was cropped short, almost military. His smile was thin, performative. "Good afternoon," he said, voice smooth but lacking warmth. "Sorry to bother you. I'm looking for a dog. German Shepherd. Black coat. Answers to Shadow. He went missing a couple weeks ago." Ash padded down the hall before Ruth could respond. Lana stayed frozen behind him, her small hand gripping the doorframe. Ash stopped in front of Ruth and let out a low, unmistakable snarl, his body between her and the door like a living shield. The man looked down at Ash and tilted his head. "There you are," he said too casually. "Well, look at you. Been a long time, boy." The growl deepened. Ash didn't budge. Ruth's fingers instinctively tightened around the chain lock. "You said his name is Shadow?" "Yes, ma'am. Derek Langston." He pulled a folder from inside his coat, flipping it open to reveal a few documents, vaccination records, a faded photograph of a black German Shepherd in front of a white building. "Trained him myself. K9 program, private contractor. He slipped out during a thunderstorm a few weeks back. Been tracking him ever since." The man's voice had that tone measured, almost too rehearsed. The way someone speaks when they've told the same lie so many times, they've started believing it. Ruth didn't reach for the papers. "Do you have proof of ownership?" "Those are the papers," he said, holding them up again. "His microchip'll match." Ash's eyes never left Derek. His body was taut like a bowstring, legs ready to spring. Lana stepped closer behind him, her voice quiet but steady. "His name's Ash." Derek's gaze flicked to the girl, just for a second, but it was long enough. A shift in his expression. A quick, unsettling smile. "He's always been good with kids," he said. "Protective. That's what we trained them for." Ruth felt it then, that subtle wrongness. The way his words felt off, like nails just slightly misaligned. Something in her gut stirred. She'd felt it before, years ago, when a man came to their door during the war, wearing a clean uniform but speaking with eyes that gave away the rot underneath. She looked down at Ash. He wasn't just reacting to a stranger. This was something deeper, old pain, fear, masked as fury. The dog wasn't just growling, he was warning. "I'm sorry, Mr. Langston," she said slowly, her voice firm. "But I can't let you in, not without more than papers." Derek's polite facade slipped for just a beat. His mouth twitched. "I didn't come to make trouble, ma'am. I just want my dog. If he's chipped," Ruth replied evenly, "we'll have the vet scan him. If it checks out, we'll talk then." He studied her, and for a long moment, no one moved. Then he stepped back from the door. "All right," he said, that smile crawling back onto his face like a shadow. "I'll be in touch." And with that, he turned and walked back toward the black car parked at the curb. Ruth watched him the whole way, her breath tight in her chest. When the car pulled off, disappearing down the road, she shut the door and locked every bolt. Only then did she exhale. Ash turned and nudged Lana gently with his nose, as if checking she was okay. Lana threw her arms around him, burying her face in his fur. He let out a soft huff but didn't move away. "He was scared," Lana whispered. "Ash was scared." "I know, sweetheart," Ruth said, her voice low. "I saw it too." They all stood there in the quiet, the silence of the house pulsing with the unspoken truth. That man was dangerous, and Ash, whatever his past was, terrified of going back. Ruth went to the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water with trembling hands. She stared out the window for a long time, the empty street stretching before her like a question with no answer. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a memory stirred of her late husband returning home with bruises that didn't come from war, of a firehouse dog that once refused to follow a man who wore the same badge as his trainer. Animals remember, sometimes better than people do. She placed the glass down, turned, and looked at Ashno curled protectively around Lana, both of them on the rug in the living room. He wasn't just a dog, he was a survivor. And now, someone wanted him back for all the wrong reasons. Ruth stepped closer and knelt beside them, placing a gentle hand on Ash's back. His ears flicked toward her. For the first time, he didn't flinch at the touch. "We won't let him take you," she said softly. "Not if I have anything to say about it." And Ash blinked once. Then, almost imperceptibly, his tail brushed the floor. The kitchen was quiet, except for the soft tick of the wall clock and the occasional creak of the old wooden floorboards. Ruth sat at the table, her fingers wrapped around a chipped mug of lukewarm coffee. Across from her, Lana had her laptop open, the screen casting a bluish hue across her worried face. Outside, Ash lay sprawled across the threshold of the back door, half awake, his ears twitching at every faint noise. It had been 3 days since Derek Langston appeared on their porch like a shadow out of someone else's nightmare. The memory of his forced smile, the manufactured concern in his voice, and the way Ash had gone rigid the moment he stepped closer. None of it had sat right with Ruth. Not then. Not now. She pulled out her phone and stared at a number she hadn't dialed in years. Then, with a breath that came more from instinct than confidence, she pressed call. A crackling pickup. "Ruthie?" A warm male voice answered, slightly groggy. "Been a while." "Delaney, I need your help," she said, voice low and deliberate. "Okay," he paused. "You sound like you're sitting on a powder keg." "I think I am." She recounted the events in precise, measured language. The dog, Ash. The stranger. The paperwork that felt too perfect. The look in Ash's eyes that wasn't fear, it was recognition and dread. She heard Delaney go quiet on the other end. "What's this guy's name again?" he finally asked. "Derek Langston." Says he trains dogs. Says Ash is his. But I don't buy it. And Ash doesn't either. I'll run the name through our system. Might not get much if he's careful, but I know how to dig deeper than Google. Give me an hour." When the call ended, Ruth didn't look at Lana immediately. She just sipped her coffee and stared out the window, where the clouds were starting to knit themselves into a gray blanket overhead. Storms again. Always storms lately. Lana's voice broke the silence. "Grandma, look at this." Ruth leaned over. On the screen was a news article from nearly 2 years ago, posted on a small investigative site in southern Missouri. The headline read, "Underground Dog Training Camp Shut Down for Cruelty Allegations." Her heart kicked hard against her ribs. Lana scrolled slowly. There were photos, some blurred for the protection of minors, others graphic. Rusted cages, dogs with visible rib cages and missing patches of fur, training fields with barbed fencing. An anonymous quote from a former volunteer spoke of beatings disguised as discipline and exercises meant to break the dogs before building them back into something else, something obedient. Ruth's eyes trembled over every word. And then, there it was. A face, a photo of a man in a black polo shirt with Canine Tactical embroidered across the chest, a whistle hanging from his neck. Derek Langston. Ruth's voice was barely a whisper. "That's him." Lana's lip trembled. "They shut it down. But he was never charged." Of course not, Ruth thought bitterly. Because cruelty behind chain-link fences was always easier to dismiss when it was cloaked in words like training, discipline, and behavioral conditioning, especially for dogs that couldn't testify. Her phone buzzed. Delaney. "Hey, Ruth, I got something." She put him on speaker. "He's not clean," Delaney said. "Your gut was right. There are several complaints under Derek Langston's name on registered facilities, anonymous calls about barking and screaming late into the night, dogs showing up injured. But every time, he either moves states or the trail goes cold. He's got connections, someone cleaning his slate behind the scenes." "Any formal charges?" Ruth asked. "No convictions, just smoke. A lot of it." Lana interrupted. "We found an article. Training camp in Missouri. Shut down. Derek was in the photo." Delaney exhaled through his nose. "Send that to me. I'll forward it to someone I trust in animal welfare enforcement. It might take time, but maybe, just maybe, this time, we can get him for real." The line went quiet for a beat. Then he added softly, "Keep that dog safe, Ruth, and that girl." "I will." She ended the call and turned to Lana. The silence between them was heavy, but full of agreement. Ruth walked to the cupboard and pulled out a folder labeled Home Papers. Inside, she found an envelope and drew out 3 crisp photographs from years ago, black and white pictures of her late husband in uniform, standing proudly next to a Dalmatian with a firehouse vest. "Milo," she whispered. Lana leaned over. "That was Grandpa's dog?" "He wasn't just a dog," Ruth said. "Milo pulled him out of a burning hallway after a ceiling beam collapsed. Saved his life. They gave him a medal. But more than that, Milo stayed by his side after the war, through nightmares and injuries and the long silence that sometimes took over after loud places." She looked toward Ash lying by the door. "I know what a dog like that carries, what they remember. It's written in the way they walk, in the way they guard, even after the threat is gone." Lana's voice shook. "He doesn't deserve to go back to someone like Derek." "He won't," Ruth said, the words solid and cold. "Not if I have breath left in me." They didn't say much else after that. Later that night, as the wind pushed against the windows and the rain whispered down the gutters, Ruth stood in the doorway and watched Ash sleep near Lana's bed. His body blocked the door as if it were instinct. Or promise. And for the first time in a long time, Ruth allowed herself to pray not to prevent pain, but to preserve courage. They would need it. The flyer fluttered in Ruth's hand, the edges worn from days of being gripped tightly, folded, unfolded, passed around. Derek Langston's photo stared out from the page with a smile that didn't reach his eyesa. Smile that now stirred unease in every corner of Millbrook. That morning, the porch was damp with dew, but the air already held the pulse of midsummer heat. Ruth stood on her front steps, coffee cooling in her mug, eyes scanning the neighborhood as if expecting Derek to emerge from one of the hedgerows. Ash lay beside her, alert but calm, at least for now. Lana was inside, helping Emily with her science project, but Ruth couldn't settle. The knock from days before still echoed through her bones like a warning drumbeat. She didn't wait for the town to come to her. Ruth walked across the street, the gravel crunching under her shoes like a reluctant welcome. Mrs. Ellsworth was deadheading her roses, clad in her ever-present wide-brimmed sun hat and peach gardening gloves. A woman who, just a week ago, had said dogs belong behind fences, not on porches, paused mid-snip when Ruth approached. "Morning," Ruth greeted, voice tentative. Mrs. Ellsworth straightened, brushing a leaf from her blouse. "Morning, Ruth." There was a silence and not cold, just hesitant. Ruth held out the flyer, her hand shaking slightly. "Have you seen this man around? He came to our house asking about Ash." Mrs. Ellsworth took it, her lips pursed. She stared at the picture, then looked past Ruth to where Ash lay in the yard. "That dog's got eyes, like he's seen war," Ruth nodded. "He has. He's not just a dog. He's protecting my granddaughter now." There was a beat, a long one. Then Mrs. Ellsworth folded the paper and slid it into her apron pocket. "I'll keep an eye out. If I see his car again, I'll call you first. Then Delaney." Ruth blinked. "You've seen his car?" "3 days ago. Parked near the park. Didn't think much of it then. But now," she shook her head. "That dog of yours growled like hell when the man showed up, didn't he?" Ruth let out a slow breath. "He did. Stood between Derek and Lana like a wall." Mrs. Ellsworth's voice softened. "You know, my brother was in the Navy. Had a dog overseas. Swore it saved him more times than the damn squad did. After he died, the dog wouldn't eat for days. Animals don't forget pain. And they don't pretend to like someone who hurt them." Something thawed in Ruth's chest. Word spread faster than Ruth expected. Maybe it was the way small towns worked. Maybe it was something deeper, something shared. A collective memory of the time Mrs. Grady's barn burned down and half the street helped rebuild it. Or when the Perkins boy went missing and everyone combed the woods until dawn. This town knew how to come together when the quiet was threatened. That afternoon, Ruth found a note slipped into her mailbox. Saw a black pickup circling near 5th Ave, matched the photo. "Let me know if you need help. Doug, garage on Miller Lane." And another on her windshield when she went to the grocery store. "We're watching. He won't get past us. Pay." Even the grumpy old cashier at Maple Mart, who usually scowled at Ash's photo taped to Ruth's wallet, nodded solemnly and said, "He's a good dog. Keep him close." Ruth hadn't realized how many people had been watching Ash, not in fear, but in awe, the way he shadowed Lana like a sentry. The way he froze at strange footsteps, ears trained, muscles taut not as a threat, but as someone ready. People remembered. They noticed more than she thought. That evening, Ruth held an impromptu gathering at her house. Just 5 neighbors at first. Mrs. Ellsworth, Doug from the garage, young Marisol from the bakery, and Pete and Howard from the fire station. They brought folding chairs, lemonade, and a hushed kind of urgency. Pete, a burly man with soot-streaked forearms, leaned forward. "Langston's name rang a bell. I think he trained dogs for private security a few towns over. But folks whispered about how he treated them. Of Proston, not trained," Howard corrected. "Broke. There's a difference." Ruth listened, absorbing every word. Lana sat nearby with Ash curled at her feet, his eyes never drifting from the windows. His ears flicked once as Pete spoke Derek's name, and his tail gave a subtle thump on the floor when Lana's hand settled gently between his shoulders. "You think he'll come back?" Marisol asked. Ruth looked around the room. Faces lined with concern, determination, fear. Yes, but not the paralyzing kind. "I think he already has," Ruth said. "But he won't get through Ash, and he won't get through us." Mrs. Ellsworth raised her glass of lemonade to the shepherd. They all lifted their drinks. That night, after the chairs were folded and the porch swept of breadcrumbs and quiet murmurs, Ruth stood alone in the yard. Ash lay near her, his body still, but his eyes watchful. "You feel it too, don't you?" she said softly. Ash didn't move, but his tail brushed the grass once, a quiet answer. The stars above blinked faintly, scattered behind drifting clouds. Somewhere in the distance, a car engine revved, then faded. But Ruth felt something stronger now than fear. Not safety, because that was fragile. What she felt was resolve. shared, rooted, awake. And in the stillness of that small-town night, with a war-scarred dog at her feet and a granddaughter asleep under his silent protection, Ruth understood. Sometimes, healing doesn't start with answers. It starts with people who refuse to look away. People who, when the storm comes again, will open their doors and stand together. The knock this time was different. Not hesitant like before. Not a neighbor. Not a friend. It came like a demand to, sharp raps, a pause, then another set, firmer, louder. Ruth stood still in the hallway, her hand frozen on the laundry basket. The autumn light filtered through the lace curtains, and in its glow, dust floated gently, peacefully, like nothing had changed. But everything had. Ash was already at the door. He didn't bark. He didn't move. He stood there like stone muscles taut, tail stiff, eyes locked on the wooden barrier separating him from what waited outside. A low, guttural sound began in his chest. It wasn't for show. It wasn't performative. It was a warning older than language. "Lana," Ruth said quietly, setting down the basket. "Go to the back of the house now." Lana, who had been sitting on the rug drawing trees with orange crayons, looked up at Ash, then at her grandmother's face. She didn't ask questions. She just nodded, gathered her crayons, and slipped out of the room like a shadow. Ruth approached the door. She didn't open it. She didn't even touch the handle. She peered through the peephole and her stomach dropped. Derek Langston was back, but he wasn't alone. Two men stood on either side of him, stocky, uniformed. They wore dark navy jackets with a private security company's crest stitched above the breast pocket. Each had a badge clipped to their belts reel enough to intimidate. But not police, not law, not right. Ash's growl deepened. "Miss Walker," Derek called, voice smooth and loud enough for the whole block to hear. "You've had ample time to reconsider. I'm here to collect my property." And Ruth's fingers found the chain lock. She opened the door just a few inches, just enough to let her voice carry. "He's not your property." Derek tilted his head, a practiced look of smug surprise etched on his face. "According to my paperwork, he is, and I have every legal right to retrieve what belongs to me." "Then why bring muscle?" Ruth's voice was steady, but her heart wasn't. "Why not go through the proper channels?" One of the security men smirked. The other cracked his knuckles. Ash took a step forward, placing his massive body in front of Ruth's legs. He wasn't barking. He wasn't lunging. But his message was crystal clear. "You will not pass." "I don't want this to get ugly," Derek said, pulling a folder from under his coat. "This has a microchip registry, training contract, purchase documentation." Ash was assigned under a private working dog program still, active, still valid. Ruth didn't reach for the papers. "You trained him to fear. That's not ownership." "That's abuse." "You're not a judge," Derek snapped. "And that's just sentimentality talking." "I'm not alone," Ruth replied, lifting her chin. "We have a vet's report confirming trauma, scarring, behavioral PTSD likely from tactical training and mistreatment. You don't get to walk up and erase that with a piece of paper." The smirk on Derek's face cracked just for a second. He turned to his men. "She's obstructing recovery. We can bring this to court, but that'll cost her." Ash's ears pinned back. He stood his ground like a soldier, remembering a battlefield. "Go ahead," Ruth said, her voice colder now. "Try to take him. You'll have to go through him, and me, and a neighborhood that's already watching you." Derek looked past her, scanning the porch, then the windows of nearby houses. Curtains moved. Doors creaked. Someone across the street stepped out and pretended to rake leaves, though he watched with every motion. "You've stirred more than you meant to," Ruth said, meeting his eyes. "The community's awake now. We're not blind anymore." Derek took a step back. The silence grew heavy. "I'll see you in court then," he said flatly. "You're harboring stolen property." "Not stolen," Ruth replied. "Rescued. There's a difference." He lingered a moment longer, and for the first time, uncertainty flickered behind his eyes. He turned on his heel. The two men followed. Ash didn't move until the last of their footsteps faded. Only then did he let out a low breath and sit, not relaxed, just watching, always watching. Ruth knelt beside him and laid her hand gently against his back. "You're not property, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice barely holding steady. "You're family, And no one's taking you away from us. Ash didn't wag. He didn't whimper. But he leaned into her touch, just slightly. And in that quiet gesture, the weight he allowed her to carry for a second, was everything. The phone call came just after sunset. Ruth was standing by the kitchen sink, rinsing off Lana's paint-stained t-shirt, when her cell phone vibrated against the windowsill. The name that flashed on the screen made her stomach tighten. Delaney. She answered on speaker. Tom? Ruth, came the low voice on the other end. You need to get Ash out of the house. Now. Her hand froze. Water kept running. What's going on? He's pushing something through the county circuit civil retrieval order, based on ownership, not welfare. Claims Ash's microchip links back to a company he used to work for. Ruth's chest tightened. But the vet report, Dr. Hallis. Doesn't matter yet. He's not filing abuse. He's filing property claim. They're treating Ash like a stolen asset. If the judge signs off before your vet report is submitted, animal control could be forced to comply. Her fingers curled around the edge of the sink. What do we do? You meet me at my place. Tonight. I'll make room in the barn for Ash and Lana. Safer out here than in town until we fight this properly. She didn't hesitate. We'll be there in 20. The wind had picked up by the time Ruth drove out of the neighborhood. Every leaf seemed louder. Every car that passed made her glance into the rearview mirror. In the back seat, Lana sat cross-legged, arms around Ash. He was alert, ears high, his chest rising against her ribs, with steady calm. She spoke to him in a whisper, her fingers tangled in his thick fur. No one's gonna take you, she whispered. Not ever again. Ash let out a soft huff, resting his chin on her leg as if he understood every word. The road bent out of town, into open farmland. It was darker Herino street lamps, just the moon casting long silver streaks across the wheat fields. Ruth gripped the steering wheel tighter, feeling the weight of something ancient in the silence. Fear, defiance, a mother's instinct. They passed a wooden sign half buried in grass. Delaney Ranch. Tom Delaney met them at the front gate. He held a heavy flashlight and wore a worn flannel over his badge. His eyes swept over Ash with a mix of concern and reverence. Good boy, he muttered, still sticking to the girl like glue. Ash stepped out of the car first, circling once before letting Lana down. He didn't bark, didn't growl, just stood with his body diagonally between her and the shadows. Tom led them around the house to a structure behind the barn, a converted loft with a cot, hay bales, and a fire pit outside. It smelled of cedar and old saddles. Safe. Won't find you out here unless they're looking hard, he said. And if they do come, I'm not in uniform that night. Ruth met his gaze. Thank you. I've known you too long not to believe your gut. And the way that dog watches her? He nodded toward Lana. That's not training. That's bond. Lana was already on the floor of the loft, using her backpack as a pillow. Ash lay curled beside her, his tail draped protectively across her legs. It was the only time Ruth had seen him rest that fast in weeks. Later that night, Ruth stood beside the fire pit, staring into the flames. The stars were a dome overhead, sharp, unblinking. She hugged herself, more for the weight of everything than the cold. Delaney came beside her, handing her a tin mug of coffee. Found more on Langston. 5 years back, the guy was running a training compound outside of Helena. Shut down after a whistleblower claimed they were using aversion tactics, electric collars, food deprivation. No charges stuck. But he moved his operations south, right after. Ruth exhaled through her nose. He doesn't want Ash because he loves him. He wants him because he represents something. Tom nodded. Proof he can. Create control. Or worse, a witness with fur. A sharp snap behind them made both turn, but it was just a raccoon scuttling into the brush. Still, Ruth's heart hammered. Tom glanced back toward the loft. How's she holding up? Ruth smiled faintly. She talks to Ash more than to me these days. He listens like he understands the things she doesn't know how to say. Tom sipped. Sometimes I think dogs hear the soul, not the sound. Inside the loft, Lana lay awake, though her eyes were closed. Ash breathed beside her, warm and steady. The soft rise and fall like waves. His ear twitched now and then, sensing, scanning, even in sleep. She reached out and touched his chest. "Do you remember him?" she whispered. "That man with the paper and the cold voice?" Ash made a small, muffled whine. His tail flicked once, then settled again. Lana leaned in, her lips near his ear. "You don't have to go back. I don't care what they say. You're not a tool. You're not a thing. You're my family." Outside, the wind stirred the dry grass. Somewhere in the distance, an owl cried. And beneath the cover of night, with the world holding its breath, a girl and her dog slept pressed together, two souls that had found each other in the fallout of what others left broken. The morning mist hung low over the valley, veiling the edges of the world in pale uncertainty. From the top of Officer Delaney's ridge, the land stretched wide and quiet, but beneath that quiet, Ruth felt it in her bones. Something was wrong. It was Ash who confirmed it first. His ears perked, body tense, nose lifted toward the wind. They had been scanning license plates for hours, matching them with the drone photos Delaney's nephew had taken over the weekend. It wasn't until Ruth traced a familiar black suburban Derek's car that something clicked. There it was again, parked beside a long, windowless warehouse outside of town. A building hidden behind a screen of half-dead pine trees and brush, sitting just off an unmarked dirt road, where the GPS map faded into blank gray. Lana leaned in close, narrowing her eyes at the grainy drone images. That fence, barbed wire, and those shapes near the back. Kennels? Delaney adjusted his glasses. No business signage. No registration in county property records. Whoever owns it, they're keeping it off-grid, intentionally. Ash gave a low growl beside them, staring at the laptop like he understood every word. His tail flicked with alert tension, his paws shifting uneasily. Ruth felt it again, that cold knot in her stomach. It's not just a warehouse. It's a holding pen, a secret one. Delaney clicked through more images, zooming in on one particular frame. "Look, movement near the back. You see it?" he pointed. "Right there, behind the fence. That blur." Lana leaned in. "That's a dog." "No dogs. At least 3. They stared in silence, letting it sink in. The stillness of the drone photo seemed to vibrate with something hidden just beneath it, a soundless cry. Ruth whispered, "How many more?" Ash stood, tense and upright now, his body angled toward the window like he could smell the place through steel and distance. The hair on his back had risen in a soft, jagged line. He let out a deep, guttural growl that didn't sound like fear. It sounded like memory. Delaney exhaled slowly. "We could pass this to animal control, but they'll need days warrants, process. Derek could clear out by then." "And move them again," Ruth said, bitter. "Like he's done before." Lana's fingers hovered over the trackpad, then curled into a fist. "No," she said softly. "No more hiding. No more waiting." She looked up at them, her voice trembling not from fear but from something deeper conviction. "Let's expose him." Ruth blinked. "Lana." But the girl stood firm. "We have pictures. We have evidence. We know where it is. If we just sit on this, they'll disappear again. Like ghosts." Her eyes softened as she glanced at Ash. Like he almost did, Ash walked to her side and sat, tail thumping softly. It was almost like he was agreeing. Ruth had seen that look in his eyes before, back when Lana first found him. A kind of silent trust. And now, it was back. Fierce. Focused. As if Ash knew this wasn't just about him anymore. Delaney looked at both of them. "You're talking about going public. We don't break in. We don't touch anything. We film," Lana said. "We get close enough to see it for ourselves. Video. Audio. Get names if we can. Faces. Then we show everyone." Ruth hesitated. The mother in her reeled at the idea. Lana was barely 15. But the woman in Hearth, woman who had seen Derek's eyes at the front door, who had heard Ash's growl like a warning from the bones of the earth, knew there were battles that waited for no permission. Delaney gave a slow nod. "If we do this, we do it smart. At dawn. No traffic. I'll keep the sheriff in the loop. Quietly. I know someone who won't tip Derek off." Lana reached out and scratched Ash behind the ear. "I'm not afraid," she whispered. "Not anymore." Ash pressed his head into her hand, closing his eyes like he understood what was coming. Like he had waited for this moment longer than anyone could measure. That night, Ruth sat outside the cabin as the stars began to bloom across the sky. Ash rested near her feet, eyes half-lidded but alert. Lana slept inside, curled under an old quilt, her arm wrapped protectively around Ash's leash, as if she feared someone might steal him even in dreams. Ruth watched the firelight dance, shadows shifting across the trees. "You're more than just a dog," she murmured to Ash. "You're proof that no matter how far someone falls, they can be found." Ash stirred at her voice, blinking slowly, then laid his head gently against her boot. The stars shimmered above, distant and steady. But for the first time in weeks, Ruth didn't feel small beneath them. She felt aligned. The wind moved through the trees in a hush. Somewhere out past those ridges and empty roads, a warehouse waited in silence filled with unseen lives, unheard stories, but not for long. The wind pushed softly through the porch screen, carrying with it the scent of dry pine and early summer. Inside Ruth's kitchen, everything was still. Even the old clock above the stove seemed to tick a little slower, like it too understood the weight in the room. Lana sat at the table, her hands clasped tight around a chipped mug of tea that had long since gone cold. Her eyes were red not from crying, but from a night of almost sleep, the kind where you lie awake watching the ceiling and thinking of everything that could go wrong. Ash lay curled near her feet, one ear twitching now and then, but even in rest he was alert, always aware, always between her and the world. Across from her, Ruth stood with arms crossed, jaw clenched. The silence had stretched for several minutes after Lana's words, as if the air itself resisted what she was proposing. "You're not seriously suggesting this," Ruth finally said, her voice low, sharp with disbelief. "Luring a man like Derek Langston out with Ash? Like bait?" "It's not bait," Lana said quietly. "It's strategy." Ruth shook her head, her hand gripping the back of the chair. "That man trained dogs to fight until their bones snapped. He used them like weapons, like disposable tools. He's dangerous, Lana. You're talking about exposing Ash again after everything he's been through." "I know," Lana said, voice trembling but steady. "I know what he's been through. I've seen it. I've held him through nightmares. I've watched him wake up shaking, barking at shadows no one else could see." Ash stirred at her feet, lifting his head slightly. His amber eyes met hers. They didn't need words. Not anymore. Ruth stepped back, pacing now. "We've kept him safe, out of sight. And, thanks to Delaney, we've kept the pressure on Derek. Why escalate it? Why provoke him?" Lana's gaze didn't move from Ash. She reached down, fingers brushing the soft fur at his neck. He leaned into her touch, like he always did. Like he had since that first morning on the couch, curled around her broken ribs and her even more broken spirit. "Because," she said softly, "Ash gave me my life back." That stopped Ruth in her tracks. "When I got home from the hospital," Lana continued, her voice steadier now, "I couldn't breathe without fear. Couldn't walk past my own mailbox. I jumped at doorbells. I slept with a light on. The world was too loud, too close. But Ash," she paused, tears welling, "Ash taught me how to feel safe again." The room grew impossibly quiet. He never needed words to say, "I'm here." He just was. Every night, every panic attack, every whispered, "I can't do this." He stayed, even when I couldn't stay in my own body. Ash rose now, padding quietly to her side and resting his chin on her lap. She stroked the top of his head, her hands finally unclenching. "There are others like me," Lana whispered. "Other kids, other dogs, stuck in places they can't escape. We found that warehouse, Ruth. We heard those barks. They're still there, still suffering. And you think using Ash will fix that?" "I think it's the only thing that will bring Derek out into the open," Lana replied. "We control the situation, full police backup, hidden cameras. The moment he shows his face, we shut him down. For good." Ruth's eyes softened, but she was still torn. "He's not just a dog to you. You know that, right?" Lana nodded. "He's not just a dog. He's family. He's my compass." Ruth looked away for a long moment, toward the window, where the morning light was beginning to stretch over the hills. She had raised Lana like her own, protected her, nursed her through years of trauma that no child should have had to endure. And now this girl, this woman, stood before her, asking to walk willingly into danger. But maybe that's what healing looked like. Maybe it wasn't just hiding from the darkness. Maybe sometimes it meant turning back toward it and holding your ground. Ruth finally sighed, her shoulders sagging. If we do this, it's on our terms. Delaney calls the shots. No risks we don't agree to. Of course, Lana said, a flicker of hope lighting in her chest. And I want eyes on Ash the entire time. No one touches him. No one separates you, I promise. Ruth hesitated, then added softly, You really think you're ready for this? Lana met her eyes. I'm scared, she admitted. But I'm more scared of what'll happen if we do nothing. And they sat in silence for a few heartbeats more. Then Ruth walked to the phone on the wall and dialed a number she knew by heart. Delaney, she said. We're in. The morning dawned quiet too. Quiet for a town that had been bracing for something for weeks. Mist curled low around the sidewalks, softening edges, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Ruth stood on her porch with a thermos clutched in one hand and a worn blanket draped around her shoulders, eyes scanning the end of the street. Lana, already dressed in jeans and her navy blue hoodie, clipped the leash to Ash's harness. He was alert, his ears erect, his body tense like a coiled spring. Ash wasn't just a dog anymore, he was signal, shield, and sentry. You sure you're ready? Officer Delaney asked quietly from beside her. He wore his uniform-like armor, today bulletproof vest, utility belt, walkie on his shoulder, though his eyes remained kind. There's no shame in backing out. Lana shook her head. He came after Ash in broad daylight. He brought men in uniforms and threatened legal action like we were nothing. This is the only way to stop him for good. Delaney exhaled, long and slow. Then let's do this. By 9 o'clock, the plan was in motion. They didn't call it a protest, because protests drew attention, and Derek Langston knew how to vanish when spotlights appeared. They called it a community dog walk, just neighbors out enjoying the sunshine, walking rescue pups and golden retrievers, a few toddlers in wagons, teenagers on bikes. But in the soft murmurs, in the way people walked with eyes peeled and heads low, something more powerful buzzed beneath the surface. Solidarity. Mrs. Ellsworth, who once scoffed at Lana's wild hair and the mutt, showed up with a pit bull she borrowed from the shelter. I figured if the Langstons are watching, they should see my stance, she'd said, adjusting her floral sun hat with quiet defiance. 100 yards ahead of the walking line, Lana moved with Ash. Her pace was slow but sure. Her hand on his leash was steady, though her fingers trembled in her pocket. The road curved just enough that when she reached the slope near the abandoned soybean field, the warehouse emerged like something half swallowed by earth and time. It looked like it didn't belong here, flat gray siding, a long metal fence with blacked-out mesh, and a gate that hadn't opened in weeks. No signs, no logos, just cameras mounted too high, pointed too low. Ash posed, his muscles locked. A low growl rumbled from his chestnut, the kind of growl he used when protecting Lana on instinct, but the kind born from memory. He knew this place. His past had left its scent on the dirt. Lana crouched, gently cupping his face. Easy, boy. I'm here. We're okay. Ash licked her hand once and pressed his head into her chest, anchoring himself. His tail didn't wag. From the corner of her eye, Lana spotted Ida Carr, parked behind a row of pines off the service road, jet black, tinted windows. Its grill shimmered like a sneer in the sun. Delaney, she whispered into the small mic clipped to her collar. He's here. Far side of the fence. Black sedan. Got him. Officers in position. We're not moving until he does. Inside the sedan, Derek Langston sat still, like a statue dipped in malice. His eyes didn't blink. But the moment Lana and Ash began to walk past the chain-link border of the field, the car roared to life. Ash tensed, his body angled between Lana and the sound. Lana didn't stop walking. The car peeled forward, grinding over gravel, and then turned sharply onto the public road, cutting across the group of walkers as if scattering pigeons. A few people gasped. One mother pulled her child behind her. Derek rolled down his window, his voice slicing the air like a blade. That's my dog. Lana stopped. Ash didn't move. Delaney appeared from behind a parked van, stepping between the two. His badge glinted like a dare in the sun. This is a public space, Mr. Langston. You need to lower your voice. Derek's face flushed. You're hiding stolen property. That dog belongs to me. And this girl, she's part of a conspiracy. Got it all on record, another officer said, holding up a body cam. How you followed her. How you approached under false authority. And now, how you're disrupting a peaceful community event. Derek opened his door, half standing. You don't know what that dog is. He's part of a program. He's not a Peeth. He's trained for tactical response. You have no idea what he's capable of. No, Lana said, stepping forward. Her voice didn't shout, but it cut clean through the noise. You don't know what he's capable of. Ash stood at her side, unmoving, as if carved from loyalty. He saved me, Lana continued, voice cracking now. Not just from danger, but from being invisible, from being a shadow in my own life. He listens, he waits, he protects. That's not something you trained. It's something you tried to break. A silence dropped over the block like a blanket. And then, in the stillness, Mrs. Ellsworth stepped forward. We know who you are, Mr. Langston. We know what you've done. And no matter how you dress it up in uniforms or contracts or government jargon, we're not looking away this time. A quiet ripple of agreement echoed behind her. Derek faltered. He looked at the crowd, then the officers, then Ashu stared back without blinking, without a growl, just an eerie, knowing calm. And then he did what cowards always do when the light shines too bright. He retreated. Tires screeched as the car spun in a half circle and vanished down the road. But it wasn't victory that pulsed in Lana's chest. It was the steady, low thrum of something bigger, the beginning of an ending. She dropped to her knees beside Ash, burying her face in his neck. You did so good, she whispered. I'm so proud of you. Ash exhaled, slow and deep, as if letting go of something he hadn't been able to name until now. Above them, the sky finally cracked open with light. The late afternoon sun cast long amber shadows across the quiet road near the warehouse. There was a stillness in the air, the kind that comes before a summer storm, not of wind or rain, but of reckoning. The townspeople of Willowmere had gathered, not with pitchforks or protest signs, but with something fiercer, a quiet, unwavering resolve. They stood spaced along the cracked sidewalk and gravel shoulder. Young couples with toddlers perched on hips, retired teachers, store owners, teenagers with phones raised high, streaming to whoever would watch. Eyes narrowed, jaws clenched. They weren't shouting. They didn't need to. Ruth stood near the front, arms crossed, her frame small but unshaken. Lana, holding Ash's leash, stayed close to Officer Delaney. Ash's ears were alert, his breath calm, almost as if he sensed that this wasn't a fight but a finish line. For him, for Lana, for every forgotten dog in a locked cage no one ever heard cry. The quiet broke with a low rumble of tires. A black SUV rolled out from the warehouse gates, dirt crunching beneath wide tires. Derek sat behind the wheel, his posture stiff. A second vehicle followed. Another man inside. Security? Maybe worse. Derek slowed. He didn't get out at first. His eyes scanned the people lining both sides of the road. He was looking for a threat and found only a mirror. The reflection of every lie he thought would never catch up to him. Then he saw her. Lana stood tall, Ash by her side, dressed in a simple navy hoodie. Her free hand lifted not in a wave, but in stillness. Her eyes didn't flinch. Derek slammed the door open. You think this circus means anything? He spat, voice rough. This is harassment. You're trespassing. But no one moved. Mrs. Ellsworth, who once whispered to others about that girl with the mutt, stepped forward from the crowd. Her phone was recording, her voice calm. You're standing on public roadway, Derek. So are we. More phones lifted. The hum of recording apps buzzed in the air like a swarm. Officer Delaney stepped into the road. His hand rested near his badge. Derek Monroe, step away from the vehicle. You can't do this. I haven't done anything wrong. We have sworn statements, vet documentation, drone footage, and 6 eyewitnesses who heard dogs crying inside your warehouse. Derek's face contorted, a cocktail of arrogance and panic. That's hearsay. You have no warrant. I'll sue every one of you. That's fine, said Delaney. But first step away from the vehicle. Ash gave a low growl, not loud, but deep enough to reverberate through the crowd. Derek flinched. You trained him to growl like that? Derek barked at Lana. No, she said quietly. He just knows what you are. The second vehicle's driver, a man in a gray windbreaker, stepped out slowly, hands up. "I didn't sign up for this," he said. "I thought we were collecting a lost dog. That's what he told me." Delaney turned. "Sir, please step away and sit over there on the curb. We'll take your statement shortly." The man obeyed. Derek turned to retreat, but two other officers plainclothes, but known by everyone in the community, stepped from behind a parked pickup. One held cuffs, the other held a folder of paperwork. Delaney's voice rose not loud, but clear enough to carry into every camera and ear in the county. "Derek Monroe, you are under arrest for animal cruelty, unlawful training practices, and obstruction of justice." Gasps. But no one ran. No one interrupted. Not even Derek. For the first time in his entire operation, he stood alone. As the cuffs locked around his wrists, a dog barked in the distance. Then another. Then another. Not aggressive, not terrified, but as if their voices long silenced had just heard something change. Derek turned to Lana, his lip curled. "You think this fixes everything?" "No," she said, "but it starts something." As he was led away, Mrs. Ellsworth stepped beside Lana. "You're braver than all of us," she said. Lana shook her head. "I just couldn't let him take anyone else." Ash nudged his head gently against her thigh, tail wagging once, slow and sure. It wasn't celebration. It was something else, a recognition that he was home now. That justice, however imperfect, had begun to stir. A few townspeople began to applaud, not raucous or performative, but as if they couldn't hold still any longer, like relief had become too heavy to carry quietly. Delaney stood beside Ruth and gave a small smile. "I've been a cop 23 years, he murmured. "Never seen a town do this." Ruth's voice trembled. He thought no one would care, that no one would ask questions. "But someone did," Delaney said, nodding toward Lana. And just behind them, from inside the warehouse's chain-linked gates, a thin cry echoed. A whimper, then another. Ruth blinked, her eyes wet. "We're not done," Lana said, turning toward the sound. "There are still others in there." Delaney nodded. "We'll get a warrant by nightfall. For now, animal control is on the way. And so is every local station who's been sent this footage." Ash barked on sharp, clear, like punctuation, to a sentence that had waited too long to be spoken. The sun dipped lower behind the pine trees, throwing long lines of gold across the faces of a town that had once turned away but now, at last, stood still and stared injustice in the face and refused to blink. It didn't happen with headlines or flashing lights. No chopper overhead, no media vans. Just a Monday. Derek Cooper, once untouchable, was led away in handcuffs. No crowd, no applause. Just Ash's low growl rumbling through the silence like a warning. Justice took too long. Ruth stood beside Officer Delaney at the warehouse gates. The so-called rehabilitation site was wide open now, fences, sliced, motion sensors blinking uselessly, the air stinking of ammonia and fear. But it was the quiet that lingered, until a single whimper broke it. The dogs appeared quickly, some cowering in corners, others frozen in place. None barked. They didn't know they were free yet. Ash walked in on his own. Nails clicked on concrete, posture alert. He sniffed, turned to Lana, and nudged her hand. He didn't growl, didn't flinch. He just waited. "This is where they had him," Lana whispered. "She didn't need confirmation. The signs were everywhere." One room held shock collars still wired to batteries. Another had crates stacked 3 high, claw marks gouged into the floor. Behind a false wall, they found a broom closet-sized cell, no bedding. No food, just chains. A young officer handed Delaney a clipboard thick with coded logs. Some records show payment transfers clients out of state. Delaney frowned. Human trafficking has witnesses. Animal trafficking leaves paper trails. An hour later, a state vet arrived. Dr. Ben Huxley, compact, soft-spoken, sleeves rolled high. He moved from crate to crate, with gentleness, crouching low, offering nothing but presence. Then he reached Ash, paused. "Sergeant," he said softly, like calling a soldier home. Ash blinked, then sat. A full, deep sit, shoulders relaxed, tail down. Lana covered her mouth. Ruth's eyes brimmed. He remembered. "I've seen it before," Huxley said. When someone finally sees them, not just looks, but sees they come back. His report was clear. Not the legal property of Derek Cooper. This animal is a survivor. That sentence changed everything. Not just a note, a declaration. Ash was not a thing. He had been harmed and now he was heard. The story didn't break through news cycles. It spread quietly. Ruth's photo of Ash beside Lana, head tilted toward sunlight, a note on the library board. To Ash, thank you for surviving and for protecting our children from the monsters we never thought to question. By morning, the warehouse was federally sealed. Derek's charges now included animal cruelty, unlicensed operations, and unlawful possession. But Ruth only cared about what the world didn't see. That night, Lana jolted awake from a dream. Ash nudged her hand gently. She breathed. "You kept trying to tell me, and I'm listening now." His tail thumped once. She touched her forehead to his. "You're not property. You're family." And for the first time in too long, there was peace. At dawn, the warehouse yard filled with movement boots, crunching gravel. Gurneys rolled to vans. Radios, murmuring. Ash stood beside Lana, silent, watching. Nearby, a golden retriever limped into the light, ribs visible. A volunteer crouched to help, but the dog flinched language had once meant pain. "There's so many," Lana whispered. 34, Delaney said. "Blind, injured, but alive." Ruth approached, clipboard in hand. "We've got temp shelters in 3 counties, but they're full." "They're not just strays," Lana said. "They're survivors, victims," Delaney added. "We'll press every charge we can." A black pup, maybe 6 months old, lay frozen. Wouldn't move. An officer offered a biscuit. Nothing. Lana knelt beside him. "It's okay. No one's going to hurt you again." Ash walked over. Then he lay beside the pup. Not touching, just near. The pup looked at him. Just looked. And something flickered. "They don't need cages," Lana murmured. "They need healing." "Oh." Ruth stared at Ash. "Here," she said. Lana blinked. "What?" "This land. The barn. The paddocks. We have space. Not for all, but for some." "But you always said—" "I said I was done taking risks," Ruth interrupted. "That was before Ash showed me what happens when we don't." Delaney stepped forward. "We'll help. Permits. Paperwork. Whatever you need." "You're talking about building a sanctuary," Lana said. "No," Ruth said. "We're talking about choosing bravery over comfort, like Ash did." "Ugh." Ash lifted his head at the sound of his name. The black pup leaned closer, nose brushing Ash's shoulder. Lana didn't wipe away her tears. She just whispered, "Let's do it." From inside the warehouse, a volunteer shouted, "More crates locked." With every creak of a door, another heartbeat stepped into the light. Ash wasn't the only one. He was just the first to be seen. The barn had been empty for years. Sunday bleached planks, ivy along the base, birds in the rafters. But when Lana stepped inside, boots crunching on straw, it looked like hope. "It's bigger than I remember," she said. Dr. Hallis joined her. Sturdy bones, a little patchwork, a lot of love. This place could hold healing. "You're serious?" Lana asked. "Retirement didn't suit me. And after last week, I can't go back to pretending my work ends at the clinic door." Outside, morning fog hugged the pasture. Ruth stood with a city official, holding a folded lease. She wore the same look Lana remembered the day she took in Ashbury, but unshakable. "She's really doing this," Lana said. "She is," Hallis replied. "We are." Ruth entered, boots muddy. She stepped into the center of the barn and said quietly, "It's done." "The lease? 3 years, rent-free. The town voted last night. They said it's the least they could do." Lana's breath caught. "They said Hollow Creek owed these dogs more than outrage," Ruth added. "They wanted to give them ground." She looked around. "We'll need insulation, fencing, drainage." "I'll donate supplies," Hallis said. "I'll start a fundraiser," Lana added. But Ruth only smiled. "Let's start with one thing." From inside her coat, she pulled a wooden board. Rough, hand-carved, uneven letters, but full of care. "Hollow Creek Sanctuary. For the dogs who survived." Lana traced the words. "Who made it?" "A boy from the high school." said he couldn't stop thinking about Ash. They hung it together. No ceremony, just 3 women, a bent nail, and a borrowed hammer. But when the sign went up, the barn changed. It became a promise. By noon, volunteers arrived with paint, lumber, collars. Someone brought coffee. Someone else brought beds. 2 stalls were cleared and filled with clean straw. A heater buzzed in the corner. The back fence began to rise, shaping a run big enough for legs that had forgotten freedom. And Ash watched it all. Steady, present. The black pup now wore a collar. So did the others. By dusk, Lana stood outside the barn. Sunlight slanted through the trees. Behind her, the wind carried the sounds of hammers, laughter, and the soft thump of paws. She crouched beside Ash, brushing his ear. "We started this because of you," she said. "And now, look." Ash didn't move, just leaned into her hand. Still scarred, still silent, but whole. She looked across the field, where dogs once chained now wandered freely. Where fear once ruled, now stood a home. And at its heart, a dog who had never needed to speak to be heard. Ash was the first to walk the path. His gait was slow, cautious. But when he stepped into the yard and saw the open sky again, he lifted his head, not high, but higher than before. One by one, others followed. Some hobbled, some shook. A few curled into corners of their stalls and refused to move. But they were safe. And that, for now, was enough. Late in the afternoon, Lana found Ruth sitting on a hay bale, coat draped over her knees, hands raw from the cold. Ash lay beside her, head on her boots. "Do you think we can really do this?" Lana asked softly. Ruth didn't look up. "Number," Lana blinked. "Not alone," Ruth added. "But maybe that's the point. Healing doesn't happen alone." She reached down, brushing Ash's ears. "He was never just a dog, Lana. He was a mirror. He made us see who we could be." Lana sat beside her, watching as the last light of day hit the painted sign outside. It gleamed golden in the setting sun. The morning sun spilled over Hollow Creek in thin gold ribbons, warming dew-soaked grass that shimmered like glass. The barn doors stood open, letting in cedar-scented air and something softer hope. Ash moved through the sanctuary with quiet purpose. No longer a shadow tucked beneath Lana's bed, no longer broken. He was something else, Noah guyed, steady and calm, a survivor who remembered but wasn't defined by it. Max was the opposite. The young shepherd mix had only arrived 3 days earlier, rescued from the kennels of Derek's compound. Scarred snout, torn ear, flint-hard eyes. He lunged at kindness like it was a trap. Even Ruth had murmured to Lana, "I'm not sure we'll reach him." But Ash walked to his pen, lay down outside, and stayed. 2 hours passed, then 4. By sundown, Max stopped snarling. By dawn, he was lying inches from Ash's paw. And now, on this quiet morning, the gate stood open. Max didn't run. He followed. Ash walked slowly past the coop, past the field. He'd stop, look back, wait. And Max, tail low, unsure, followed. From the kitchen window, Lana whispered, "He knows what it feels like." Beside her, Dr. Hallis nodded. "That dog is teaching more than I ever could." "Do you think he remembers everything?" Lana asked. "Just enough to help." "In the field," Ash paused. Max hesitated, then sat beside him, still tense, still unsure. But sitting, it was everything. Later, volunteers cleaned the recovery stalls. Out in the sun, Max dozed beside Ash under the oak. His body touched Ash tentatively, but willingly. "That one," Lana said to a nervous teenage volunteer, "used to flinch when anyone looked at him. Ash changed that." "Is he like the boss or something?" the boy asked. Lana smiled. "Number. He's more like the heart. Is." By dusk, the sanctuary quieted. Soft barks, birds settling in, Ruth's radio humming from the barn. At the feeding station, Max now wore a collar, a simple green strap with his name. No rope, no chain. He ate beside Ashcombe, unhurried. Lana blinked against sudden tears. She knelt beside Ash and stroked the fur behind his ears. "You did this," she whispered. "You showed him there's something beyond cages." Ash licked her hand once. then turned back to Max, not possessive, not protective, just present. That night, Lana journaled on the porch. Ash curled at her feet. She flipped back to the entry she'd written the night they found him. There's something in his eyes. Not just fear. Something deeper. Like he's waiting for someone to prove the world wrong. She smiled. He had. And now he was helping others do the same. From the barn came a bark, then another. Ash perked his ears but didn't move. Lana recognized the voice. Max, testing the night. It echoed back not as a threat, but an answer. Morning light streamed across Ash's sleeping body. Lana sat beside him, laptop open. The cursor blinked. She finally typed, "Some dogs are born with bruises on their soles, not from bad breeding, but from being broken until silence turned sharp. This is a story not about fear. It's about recovery. And those who teach it best? The ones who lived it." She hit submit. It wasn't about going viral. It was about voice. That afternoon, Lana stood in front of a dozen middle schoolers. Ash sat beside her. "This," she said, resting a hand on his back, "is not a perfect dog. He doesn't do tricks, but he saved my life because he saw me when I didn't see myself." A hand shot up. "Did he bite someone?" "He did," Lana said. "Because he was scared. But fear isn't evil, and healing isn't a straight line." The room was quiet. By day's end, 3 kids signed up to volunteer. Lana left with hand-drawn cards and a heart full, not heavy. Word spread. Quietly. Like roots beneath soil. Churches, libraries. Veterans' halls began calling. Could they visit? Could they meet the dogs who made it out? One man watched Ash guide a nervous retriever and said, "That's how I came home too, with someone who wouldn't give up on me." Even Ruth, who once kept distance, began coaching visitors. "No yanking," she told 2 older women. "It's like dancing. Let them lead." During orientations, Ruth taught leash skills. Lana led trauma-informed recovery, a term she invented, now worn like armor. At night, Lana wrote, reflections, stories, guides. "Ash is not a rescue dog. He's a rescue teacher," she wrote in one viral post. "He doesn't forgive. He remembers. And he chooses to reach out anyway. That's recovery, not erasure, but choice." A therapist shared it. Then a mother from Illinois wrote, "My son reads that to our rescue mutt every night." I think they both believe it now. The barn changed too. Once quiet, now filled with laughter, music, the yips of healing dogs. Ash, ever the sentinel, walked slow loops. Puppies trailed him. Max stayed close. One day, Lana caught Ruth staring at a photo. The early team in front of the sign Hollow Creek Sanctuary, for the dogs who survived. "Did you ever think we'd get here?" Ruth asked. Lana thought of every trembling morning, every slow walk past Derek's facility, every breathless night beside Ash. "Not even once," she said. Ruth didn't answer. She didn't have to. One spring morning, Lana received an email from the state legislature. They wanted her to speak on a bill banning shock collars and requiring evaluations before dogs were labeled dangerous. Subject line, "Your voice matters." She read it 3 times before closing her laptop. Outside, Ash lay in the grass, surrounded by resting dogs. She crouched beside him. "You ready to teach a bigger class, old man?" Ash didn't move, just opened one, eyes low, ancient, knowing. Lana smiled. That evening, in the caretaker's kitchen, 2 mugs of tea steamed on the table. Ruth sat across from Lana, knuckles pale around her hands. Ash lay curled between them, breathing steady. "I used to be terrified of dogs," Ruth said softly. Lana blinked. "Really?" Ruth nodded. "Not because I was bitten. It was what I saw someone do to one." Lana waited. No pressure, just presence. "I was maybe 7. There was a boy on our street, always bruised. One day, his father snapped. The dog, this big, muddlinged, got between them, protected the boy, and it died for it." Lana swallowed hard. "They called it dangerous, took it away." I never forgot that growl. It wasn't rage. It was fear for someone else. She reached down, brushing Ash's fur. He shifted closer. "I told myself dogs couldn't be trusted, but I knew better. I just didn't want to remember." She exhaled. And then came Ash. He didn't push. He just existed. Quiet. Present. Like he knew what it meant to carry a shadow and not pass it on. Lana's eyes shimmered. He has that effect. Ruth met her gaze. You do too. Lana blinked. You think I signed that lease just for logistics? Ruth said, voice soft but sure. I watched you climb out of your own wreckage with a dog and a spine made of fire. You reminded me what steady bravery looks like. Lana lowered her eyes, brushing hair from her face. Some days I don't feel brave. Brave isn't a feeling, Ruth said. It's a choice. One you make every day you walk into that barn. Outside, the wind stirred the trees. Inside, Ash shifted and laid his head gently on Ruth's foot. She stilled then let her hand rest on his head. No words, no fear, just presence. You changed that, she whispered to him. His tail wagged once. You didn't ask for anything. You just gave me space, and somehow I wanted to step into it. Lana blinked fast. Ruth sipped her tea. I think about that boy sometimes. Wonder if he remembers that dog. He does, Lana said softly. They always do. Ruth smiled at Heron unspoken understanding in her gaze. Funny, isn't it? She said. We think we're here to save them. But they end up saving us. Ash let out a soft woof in his sleep. Ruth looked down. I don't want to be afraid anymore. You're not, Lana said. Not since this place stopped being a shelter and became a home. Outside, the wind swirled leaves down the gravel path. Inside, two women sat in quiet. The trees in Hollow Creek had turned again. Gold, amber, and fire-red leaves swayed gently above the sanctuary fields, drifting downward like soft-spoken memories. A light wind curled through the worn fences and open gates of the old barno, freshly painted, its once faded beams made new with care and time. Dogs ran, chased, tumbled. Some barked with glee. Some trotted more cautiously, glancing back now and then to make sure the joy was still allowed. No chains, no cages. Only freedom and the rhythm of their own breath. Near the barn side, a carved wooden sign caught the late autumn sun. Hollow Creek Sanctuary, for the dogs who survived beneath it, painted in a child's handwriting with uneven blue brushstrokes. You are safe here, forever. Ash stood in the tall grass, watching a trio of pups wrestle over a chewed-up rope toy. He didn't join, didn't need to. His presence was enough anchoring, calm, always nearby but never imposing. He'd grown heavier since spring. Not slower, just rooted. Where once he scanned for escape routes, now he scanned for stragglers, for anyone left behind. Across the yard, Lana leaned on the split-rail fence, jacket sleeves pulled down over her palms. The wind teased her hair as she watched him. Ash, her once silent shadow, now the quiet heart of an entire place. Dr. Hallis emerged from the barn, clipboard in hand and a pencil tucked behind her ear. Another intake this Friday, she called. 2 shepherds from Lancaster. One's missing a paw. The other's just shut down. Ruth stood nearby with a group of seniors from town volunteers who now came twice a week without fail. She smiled at the news, then turned back to help old Mr. Darnell adjust a harness onto a nervous beagle. No one laughed when he accidentally strapped it backwards. Instead, the others gently corrected. All kindness, no pity. That's how it was here now. Lana walked into the field, Ash meeting her halfway. Busy day, she murmured, crouching to scratch the back of his neck. He leaned into her. Just a little. She exhaled, the kind of breath that held seasons in it. Do you remember? She whispered. You were the first. Ash sat, head tilted slightly, waiting. You started all this, she said, voice low like a secret. We didn't even know we needed it. We just knew you needed something. She looked toward the sanctuary, past the barn, toward the trail where new arrivals would soon come down the gravel road, trembling and unsure. We built it for you, she said softly. But now, it's for them too. Ash nudged her wrist with his nose, then turned and trotted toward Max, the once snarling pup, now clumsily trying to leap through a pile of raked leaves. Dr. Hallis joined Lana at the fence, passing her a thermos of cider. I heard we might get state recognition, Lana said without looking over. Hallis nodded. More than that, grants, training funds, Even a regional trauma response K-9 program. Lana blinked. Here? In Hollow Creek? This place has become something rare, Hallis said. People notice when rare things survive. Ruth approached, wiping her hands on her apron. We got 6 adoption inquiries this week, she said, cheeks red from the wind. All good homes. People willing to learn, to listen. To listen, Lana repeated. That's the hardest part. She watched Ash lie beside an older Doga lab mix, missing half an ear. No barking, no play. Just silent companionship. Ash placed his paw gently across the other's, placed his paw. They're watching each other, Lana murmured. Learning how to be okay. Hallis stepped forward, shading her eyes. You know what this place is? Ruth smiled. Don't say a miracle. No, Hallis said. It's a second chance. That's different. Lana turned toward them. Number. It's the first real chance some of them ever had. Silence settled for a beat. The wind picked up, stirring the leaves. Somewhere in the distance, a bell chimed noon from the old church tower. Lana reached into her coat pocket, pulling out a worn collar leather, cracked, still bearing the faint imprint of numbers burned into it. She knelt, burying it in the roots of a maple tree near the entrance. Ruth placed a hand on her shoulder. We don't need it to remember. I know, Lana said, but I need the ground to hold it now, not me. And they stood together, 3 women, once strangers, now something like family, brought together not by history, but by healing. From the top of the hill, a school bus passed slowly. Small faces pressed against the windows. A few children waved. Lana waved back, heart tight, with something that felt like hope. Later that night, long after the last volunteer had gone, Lana stood outside with Ash. The sanctuary was quiet, except for the soft sounds of breath and paws shifting in the straw. The moon was bright, crisp, watching. You're not just the reason we started, Lana whispered. You're the reason we keep going. Ash rested his head against her hip, and for a moment, just a breath, Lana closed her eyes and leaned back. They didn't need words. They never had. And somewhere down the road, headlights cut through the trees, another car, another story, another dog, learning to be free. The day began like most others in Hollow Creek Sanctuary, soft light spilling through dew-kissed trees, the crisp scent of autumn clinging to the wind, and the quiet rhythm of dogs stretching, yawning, beginning their day in peace. Ash had taken his usual spot under the willow near the front fence, a place he seemed to guard not out of duty, but out of calm, knowing like a sentinel, not of warning, but of welcome. Lana was sorting through the mail. Most of it was mundane. Donation receipts, vet appointments, thank you notes in crayon from the elementary school where she'd spoken the week before. But one envelope stood out. It was unmarked. No return address. Thick paper. Slightly creased at the edges. Her name was typed on the front. To Lana Myers. Nothing more. Her fingers stilled. Then she broke the seal. Inside, a thin, buff-colored folder stamped in red ink, confidential. K-9. Division Archive. Her breath caught. Beneath the folder lay a handwritten note on torn notebook paper, scrawled in uneven ink. He refused to bite. That's why they discarded him. But before that, he found her. He wouldn't stop until he did. You should know. No signature. Just that. Lana sat slowly at the porch bench, the paper trembling slightly in her hands. Ash, as if sensing the shift in her breath, rose and trotted over, resting his head on her knee. She opened the file. The first page was a standard form. Name, Ash 4R13. Breed, German Shepherd, Sable. Age at enlistment, 2 years. Unit assignment, Crew Search, Rescue Plus, Tracking Division, Omega State. Handler, Confidential. The second page. Lana blinked. A photocopy of a faded newspaper clipping. Missing girl, age 6, found alive. After 48 hours, K-9 unit credited. Her eyes flew to the subheading. Ash, a German Shepherd, led officers through 5 miles of forested terrain to locate the child. Unconscious, but breathing. Officials say he broke protocol and left the grid, but he was right. Below that, a photo. Ash, younger but unmistakable, covered in mud, tongue lolling, eyes alert. Behind him, a paramedic holding a bundled child. Lana felt the sting behind her eyes, slow and steady. She turned the page again. Commendation letters, one from a police captain. Ash demonstrated extraordinary determination and intuition. Another from a trauma specialist. The girl would not be here without that dog. And then, the final entry, a disciplinary report. Subject, Ash 4R13. Incident, refusal to engage on command during controlled aggression training. Subject froze, turned away from target, did not respond to handler's repeat cues. Observed to shield another dog from strike. Recommendation, non-compliance. Decommission from program. Lana's breath hitched. She reread the line. Shielded another dog from strike. She could almost see it, Ash. Stepping between. Silent and still. Choosing empathy over conditioning. Discarded. For mercy. She looked down at him, curled beside her now, his graying fur shimmering in the amber sun. "You were never broken," she whispered. "You were just better." Ash looked up. There was a softness in his eyes, the kind that carried memory. Lana rose, the folder clutched against her chest. She walked into the house, calling for Ruth and Dr. Hallis. Within minutes, they were seated at the kitchen table, coffee cups forgotten as they pored over the documents. Dr. Hallis spoke first, voice low. "Do you realize what this means? He wasn't a reject. He was a rescuer, a hero." "And they threw him away," Ruth said bitterly, her jaw set, "because he refused to become something he wasn't." Lana nodded. Her hand trembled slightly as she tapped the final note. "But someone remembered. Someone knew. And they wanted us to know too." They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, Max the once snarling pup barked playfully, chasing leaves with a new companion. Life moved on. Dogs healed. But inside the house, history reassembled itself like shattered glass returning to shape. Lana turned to Ruth. "We need to archive this. Let every kid who comes here, every volunteer, see who he is." Ruth's eyes softened. "We will. A whole wall, if you want. Ash's story, start to finish." Lana smiled faintly, but her heart was far from still. That night, long after the sun had dipped beneath the hills and the sanctuary lights had dimmed to soft amber, Lana sat by the window with Ash curled at her feet. The file lay open on her lap. She wasn't reading any more. Ash had memorized every word, but somehow, holding it made it feel more real. Her voice broke the silence. "She was 6, she said softly. "The girl he found. That could have been me once. That was someone's daughter. Someone's whole world." Ash lifted his head slightly, blinking up at her. "You were never just a dog," she continued. "You were always trying to protect someone, even when it cost you everything." She reached down, brushing her hand through the thick fur behind his ears. "They took your name. They tried to erase what you did. But they didn't take your heart, or your choice." A rustle outside made her glance toward the barn. A new arrival, no doubt. There had been a surge in rescues since the state recognition, more calls, more dogs saved. They were growing fast, maybe faster than they could manage. But somehow, they always made room. She stood, file in hand, and walked to the bulletin board near the sanctuary entrance. Slowly, with quiet reverence, she pinned the letter, the newspaper clipping, the commendation. She left the disciplinary report off. Above it all, she placed a simple handwritten sign. Ash, survivor, rescuer, friend. Then she turned and whispered into the wind, "We remember you now, and we'll never forget." Ash, watching from the porch, gave a soft woof. Not out of pain, but something closer to peace. The night settled over Hollow Creek like a quilt stitched from every shade of blue. A half-harvest moon hung low, bright enough to silver the barn roof and paint pale ribbons across the pasture where the last leaves clung to maple branches. Wind drifted down the hill in slow breaths, carrying the faint, contented barks of dogs who had finally learned that darkness no longer meant danger. Ruth rocked gently on the porch swing, a worn Afghan tucked around her knees. Beside her, Lana perched on the rail, boots dangling, palms wrapped around a steaming mug of cocoa. Ash sprawled between them, head on his paws, ears flicking toward each new night sound an owl's call, the crunch of gravel as a late-shift volunteer drove away, the murmur of water in the creek below. For a long while, no one spoke. They didn't need to. The hush was comfortable, like a shared blanket. Overhead, constellations glittered with impossible clarity. Hollow Creek sat miles from any large town, and the sky here still belonged to the stars. Lana broke the silence first, voice low and even. I used to think families came in neat boxes, Mom. Dad, kids, maybe a dog, like the pictures in elementary school storybooks. She took a careful sip, watching steam curl from the rim. But boxes break, or they never fit some of us in the first place. Ash nudged her ankle with his nose, a soft rumble vibrating in his chest as if to say, I understand. Lana smiled, running her fingers down the ridge of fur along his spine. Ruth's rocker creaked softly. Funny thing about boxes, she said, eyes fixed on a far-off pine silhouette. Sometimes you don't know how small they are until life tips them over. She glanced at Lana, then at Ash. Then you realize you can build something better without walls at all. Hein? A breeze lifted across the porch, rattling wind chimes that Ruth's late husband had made from recycled horseshoes. The chime sang a crooked, beautiful chord, rising and falling like laughter remembering itself. Lana set her mug on the step and hugged her knees. Sometimes, she whispered, the best families are the ones we build ourselves. The words hovered in the air, simple yet vast. Ruth closed her eyes, letting them land. Behind them, in the gentle glow of lanterns strung along the barn eaves, shapes moved, dogs settling into straw. A lanky mutt pacing the fence line once before, collapsing in a satisfied heap. Max, circling twice beside an elderly Labrador before curling protectively at her side. Their rustling, sighing chorus floated toward the porch. Lives reclaimed, stories continuing. Ash shifted, pushing his head beneath Lana's hand. She scratched the spot just below his ear, the place that always made his eyes haze with calm. You did all this, she murmured to him, voice thick with gratitude. Every dog out there, every volunteer, every person who sends $5 in an envelope, they're here because you showed us how to keep trying. Ruth reached down, her palm joining Lana's on Ash's neck. He led us, she said, and we followed. In the hush that followed, Lana thought of the letter from earlier that day, tucked safely on her nightstand. The commendations, the missing child article, the final line, he refused to bite. She imagined Ash in some vast forest, nose to the earth, focused on the heartbeat of a lost little girl. She pictured him standing silent as trainers shouted commands he would not obey. She saw him choosing gentleness, again and again, even when it cost him everything familiar. He's still teaching, Lana said, her voice firmer now. Today, when we opened the new reading nook, 3 kids who were too shy to speak in class read aloud to him. Max sat beside them and didn't snarl once. It's contagious, whatever Ash has. She gave a soft laugh. I think it's courage masquerading as quiet. Ruth's eyes glistened, catching moonlight. It's love that remembers, she replied. Love that doesn't forget the wounds, but chooses kindness anyway. Ense. A low bark echoed from the far padacone. Then 2. Then a ripple, as if the dogs were calling good night to one another. Wind carried the sound up the hill, through porch posts, around the swing, and across the hearts of the 2 women and the dog who had bound their lives together. Lana inhaled deeply, the cool air filling her lungs with the scent of pine and hay. Hear that? She asked. Ruth nodded. A choir of second chances. Ash's tail swept twice against the floorboards, slow and certain. Lana slid down from the rail to sit cross-legged beside him. She leaned her head against Ruth's shoulder, the way she had when she was little and thunderstorms felt like monsters. Ruth's arm came around her back, steady and warm. Together, they looked out over the sanctuary, glowing soft in the moonlight barn windows like small suns, fences silver and sure, leaves drifting down like quiet applause. Tomorrow there'll be more paperwork, Ruth said softly. More vet bills, more broken souls showing up at our gate. Lana smiled into the dark. And more room, she answered. We'll make room. Ash stretched, letting out a deep, contented sigh, then nestled between them, his warmth weaving their silhouettes together into one long shadow across the porch. Above, a shooting star stitched a brief, brilliant line across the sky. No one made a wish. They didn't need to. They were living it. When we open our hearts to animals, we're reminded that courage can be quiet, Loyalty can be gentle, and healing often has four paws. German Shepherds like Ash show us that devotion isn't earned with command sits given freely, with every watchful glance and steady heartbeat beside us. In their company, grief softens, lonely rooms feel warmer, and the simple act of breathing side by side becomes its own kind of prayer. If today's story stirred something in you, you might enjoy a little handbook our volunteers put together, Everyday Moments That Matter with Your Dog. It's a short, heartfelt guide filled with ideas for deeper play, calmer walks, and kinder conversations with the friend who waits by your door. You'll find it on the Hollow Creek Sanctuary website, tucked under the Resources tab whenever you're ready. No rush, no pressure, just an invitation from one dog-loving soul to another. May your next walk be slower, your next scratch behind the ears a bit longer, and every shared silence a reminder that love often speaks loudest without a single word.